Yeah, that's fine, Matt.
So we're good to go, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and welcome to the members of the public and to councillors this evening to the Environment and Sustainability Panel. This meeting is being held remotely in line with the provisions of the regulations recently introduced by the government to enable the local government decision-making processes and meetings to be held remotely. The meeting is being broadcast on the council's YouTube channel, and the meeting will be available to view on the council's YouTube channel afterwards. Councillors and officers taking part in the meeting are requested to mute their microphones. Please activate the microphone when you're invited to speak and turn the microphone off when you have finished speaking. Visiting councillors and members of the public and officers not taking part in the meeting are requested to turn off their cameras until they are invited to speak. When speaking, speak clearly and slowly. Please indicate to speak by using the raise hand facility. And I will now introduce myself as chair of this committee. I'm Councillor Mark Gorey, chair of the committee and also leader of the council. And I'll introduce the rest of the councillors in alphabetical order as listed on the agenda. So that's Chapman, Chillingworth, Davidson, Gocher, McCarthy, Scaldis and Whitehead. So in that order, over to you. Nigel first.
Good evening, Nigel Chapman, Councillor for Rural North Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Peter Chillingworth, also for Rural North.
Have we not got Robert yet?
Not with us yet, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, Mark.
Councillor Mark Gocher, Castle Ward.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Sam McCarthy and I represent Shrub End Ward.
Councillor Lee Scaldis, Old Heath, Hive and Rowhedge.
Councillor Lorcan Whitehead, Newtown and Christchurch.
Thank you all. Good evening to all of you, and hopefully we'll have Councillor Robert Davidson from Pyfleet and Mersey. Moving on, I'd like to just invite some of the key officers who are here this evening to introduce themselves in this order. I have Rory Doyle, Mandy Jones, Maggie Ibrahim, Ben Plummer, Rosie Welsh, Emily Hurrett, Belinda Silkstone, Jane Thompson, Richard Walker and Chris Mussett. Rory.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Rory Doyle, Assistant Director for Environment and Lead Officer providing support to this group.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mandy Jones. I'm Assistant Director for Place and Client Services.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Maggie Ibrahim, the Sustainability and Climate Change Manager.
Ben Plummer, Climate Emergency Project Officer.
Rosie, please.
Sorry, I was having issues. Rosie Elliott, Air Quality Engagement Officer.
Then
Emily Harrop, Transport and Sustainability Projects Officer.
Belinda.
Yeah, good evening. Belinda Silkstone, Environmental Protection Manager.
Thank you, Jane.
Good evening, Chair. Jane Thompson, Transportation and Sustainability Project Officer.
Thank you, Richard.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Richard Walker, the Parking Partnerships Group Manager.
Thank you, and Christopher. Chris, are you there? So we don't have Chris yet this evening. Okay, moving on. The provisions in the Constitution around the timing of breaks will apply to this meeting. So can members please give me notice if they need to move away from their screen and put their screen onto mute if they do. Otherwise, if we get to 8 o'clock, we will stop for a break, but hopefully we will finish by then. Just to introduce this panel and the work of the panel, it's the Environment and Sustainability Panel, which explores methods of conservation of natural habitats, biodiversity, through adapting existing practices or creating new ecologically diverse environments. The panel encourages renewable energy generation and carbon footprint reduction in both the public and private spheres by examining air quality, water quality, plastic and waste reduction, and renewable energy generation. The panel monitors the progress and implementation of the Council's Emergency Climate Action Plan and regularly reports to the Cabinet and to full Council. Okay, thank you. Item 2 was substitutions. I believe there are no substitutions this evening. Item 3, urgent items. Again, I believe there are none on this evening's agenda. Therefore, I move to item 4 and ask councillors if there are any declarations of interest. I see no hands up or indications. Oh, Robert, good evening. I'll just go to you to introduce yourself.
Yes, Robert Davidson, councillor for Mersey and Pipefleet. Apologies for lateness, I couldn't log in.
We'll forgive you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you, thank you. And moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting, can I invite the panel just to indicate if there's any need for any corrections? And if not, I can take nods and no dissent as agreement on those minutes from our first meeting from last time. Are we agreed?
Chairman, Councillor Chillingworth has raised his hand.
Ah, Peter, please.
I believe on the first draft, I wasn't elected as deputy chairman. I think Councillor McCarthy was. I question whether this was correct or not.
I don't think Councillor McCarthy went for it. He may have indicated to support you to be deputy chair. Can we just double check that, please, Matthew?
Yeah.
Has that been updated?
Yes, it has been updated, Chair, and the minutes as presented show the correct position.
Your rightful power, Peter, is returned. So when I do cut out on my connection, you'll be glad to step in. And Councillor McCarthy looks relieved. Okay, thank you. So bearing in mind that one correction, can we agree those minutes, please?
Yes.
Okay, positive indications. Thank you all. Matthew, I think that's enough. We can have that consent.
Yes, it is. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6. We have no registered have your say speakers today, do we, Matthew? Just to check.
No, there are none, Chair.
Okay,
Councillor Chillingworth has raised his hand again.
Peter. You're on mute, Peter. Peter, you're on mute there. You have to unmute again.
My apologies. I thought I was lowering my hand, but I think it's shown down now, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. We'll move on, and next time, hopefully with some of what we're discussing about engagement, we hope to have more public coming to speak at this panel sometime soon. Item 7 was going to be climate emergency and community engagement, but because we have external speakers, we are bringing the item 8 on air quality forward. So the air quality project update will take first, unless there's any dissent from members of the panel. It just allows visiting speakers to leave afterwards. So let's move to the air quality project update, please. Belinda and invited guests, please come forward. So Belinda, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah. Can you hear me? You can't.
Yes.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, so thank you for inviting us here this evening to provide you with an air quality up-to-date and to share with you in more detail the borough's No Vehicle Idling campaign, Careless Pollution. We're really excited to see this campaign move from an idea on a grant application to what we're going to be presenting to you this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Belinda Silkstone, Environmental Protection Manager. I have with me today Emily Harrop, Transport and Sustainability Officer, Emily Wallace and Amy Meadows, who are from Meadows Communication, and also Rosie Welsh, an Air Project Officer. Hopefully Chris will join us. Their posts are both funded through the DEFRA grant. Through March and April, when the country was in lockdown, the council measured a 40% improvement in air pollution as compared to the same time in 2019. And many of our local residents noted and reported on the positive differences to the quality of air that they were breathing. Since the relaxation of these really strict measures, whilst the improvements have reduced, we continue to see pollution levels lower than they were in 2019 by about 20%. And whilst this year hasn't been typical, we believe that there is no better time to build on this positive change. So this evening we're going to be focusing on the council's community no idling campaign and the signage project, but other current projects are described in more detail in the briefing note. The air quality project team also try to align themselves with other projects that are going on in the council. So I'm now going to pass you over to Amy and Emma to discuss the no idling project in more detail.
Hello, thank you very much, Belinda. So my name's Amy Meadows and I run Meadows Communications. We are a specialist behaviour change company and we've been working with the council since the summer on the no idling campaign. And I'd like to start really by saying how much we're enjoying the work because we have found everyone in Colchester to be really friendly, interested, helpful and supportive. And I'll tell you about some of those partnerships that we've set up in a moment. But I think it particularly gives a lot of pleasure to my colleague Emma, who will be talking shortly because she is born and bred Colchester girl. And she's always been telling me how Colchester is one of the best places in the world to live. And I'm beginning to agree with her now on the basis of how helpful everyone's been. So what I wanted to start with was a short explanation of the campaign approach. Behaviour change theory shows that it's absolutely crucial that you understand your target audience and how they think about the issue in order that you can provide messages that are going to be motivational to them and that will address the barriers that they have towards a particular issue. So it was brilliant that when we started to get involved, the council had already undertaken research amongst more than 1,180 local residents to explore how they felt about the issue of air pollution and specifically idling. And what it showed was that there was a high degree of motivation in terms of people being willing to switch off their engines, but that people did need more information. And in particular, people felt as though they would be more involved and engaged if they understood what the health consequences would be to them themselves, because the environment otherwise can feel like a bit of an abstract concept and it doesn't necessarily connect with them in their day-to-day lives. And as a result, we very much wanted to focus on making the connection for people between car idling and highlighting the health consequences that then come as a result of poor air quality. And so what we want to do is we want people to think about the impact that the quality of air has on themselves and their health. We want them to think about it in order that they then feel that they don't want to breathe in that poor quality air and that them and their families deserve better. And that then can translate into action. And quite literally, in this case of idling, the power is in people's hands to turn off their engine to protect them and their families' health. And by so doing, also, of course, vitally, the environment. So the campaign has 4 main elements to it. The first of which, and probably I would say the most vital, is around community activation and involvement. It's really essential that we can ensure the sustainability of the campaign beyond the involvement of the council when the DEFRA funding comes to an end, and therefore our involvement as well. So in order to do that, we've established a campaigns advisory group that help to ensure that everything that we're doing is sense checked by local people. We've recruited a team of volunteer activists who are having face-to-face conversations with motorists at key idling spots, but also helping to distribute our campaign materials in order to extend the reach and breadth of what we're doing. And that's an ever-growing team of frontline kind of volunteers. And we also have a network of other stakeholders, which includes people like the hospital and businesses and a range of other kind of local institutions who are supporting the campaign, trying to get it to their employees, their supporters, visitors, people who visit their sites. And so that's really, really encouraging. And then we've organised a series of targeted events and activities, which includes the launch event, which took place on the 8th of October, and then Emma will tell you more about that shortly. We've been undertaking work with the local media, so traditional print and broadcast media, and also social media, and that's continuing. And there's been some targeted ambient advertising in and around Colchester, which we will show you some visuals for in a moment. So I'll now hand over to Emma and she'll give you a bit more information about our launch work.
Good evening, everybody. Just wanted to talk you through our launch event, which happened on Thursday, the 8th of October, which was Clean Air Day, which gave us a really good opportunity to start that dialogue about air quality in our town. And I know that a number of the councillors who are on the call today came along to that, so thank you very much. It was a really good opportunity for us to engage with the general public and to distribute some of our campaign materials. The visuals that you've got on here show the boards that we produced and some of the volunteers and councillors with those. And the idea of doing this was to visualise the toxic gases that can accumulate inside your car when your engine is idling. And many people don't realise this, that they're sitting and breathing in these fumes. And whilst that they are not visible and you often can't smell them, they are absolutely there. So we had the car with the smoke inside it to represent that so people could see that this was what they were actually breathing in. The volunteer support that we had was fantastic. And as Amy said, we had conversations with motorists around that and some really positive conversations. So in terms of media coverage, we had a mention on the ITV Anglia Breakfast News, and it was on their website. We had a news story in the Gazette and the Standard. We had really good coverage on websites from our stakeholders and also from other local community groups and from the media. So for example, the Football Club, Community 360. And also we had some really good strong media, social media coverage, which is really important for us. It means that we're really getting into the community and asking our supporters and stakeholders to use their own communication channels to promote our campaign. So here's just some examples here of some of the organisations that helped to share our messages on the day of our launch. And the visual there is the article that was in the Gazette. I've just put some examples on here of a Twitter post from Your Colchester, which is obviously one of the council-owned communication channels, but that was retweeted by the NHS. The one in the middle is a Facebook post from Colchester United, and then on the right is a website post from ITV. Here are some of the campaign materials. We've got a billboard up on Magdalen Street at the moment, so if you're in that area, you can see that. The centre right picture is a banner outside St John's Green School. The next focus activity, which Amy will talk about, is very much focusing on schools. We know that parents dropping their children off at schools are a big target audience for us. So these banners are going to be put up outside schools. We've got some petrol pump advertising at the Texaco garage on Shrub End Road. And on the left-hand side is one of our campaign posters with one of our key messages. One of the things that we sort of preempted as part of this was to think about what questions we might get asked by motorists about why they shouldn't turn their engines off. For example, they think that they would be damaging their engine by switching it on and off, or that they maybe want to use the heater, so that's why they keep their engine running. And so we've produced a postcard with some myths and facts around this, and doing some research on other no idling campaigns and some government research and other from experts saying that actually you can turn your engine off repeatedly in modern cars and it doesn't cause wear and tear. You can leave your heater running for up to 30 minutes with the ignition on and the engine off, and it will still provide you with some warm air. So these are the sorts of things that we were able to then come back and question. Obviously, there are lots of factors which determine these, which, for example, age of car, the ventilation, those kind of things. But in the main, it's good to have responses to those types of questions and to be prepared around that. So I'm now going to hand back to Amy, who can talk a bit more about how we're going to embed the campaign within the community.
So there are a number of strands to the work that we've got planned over the forthcoming months, because the campaign runs through till April 2021. As Emma's mentioned, around schools is a key priority for us, and particularly those schools which are in or around the air quality management areas. So we have already had really good support from them. As Emma's shown you, we've got schools banners up and they distributed materials. But we're currently developing a toolkit for schools whereby they can embed the messages across a range of different school-based opportunities. So as part linking it to the curriculum, assembly ideas, posters, displays, competitions for the children to take part in, running stands at key events, lots of ways in which we can try to engage with young people in order that they can then use their pester power to get their parents to stop. Because we do know from head teachers and other teachers that idling outside schools is something that unfortunately happens very, very often. We also are developing work with local businesses, and in the main we're going to do that through the Business Improvement District, who have been very supportive and really want to help us with the campaign, and then some targeted work with some other particular businesses whom we know have either high numbers of commuters going in and out of the town, people getting to work, or as part and parcel of people doing their work are in the cars a lot in the town centre. And so we'll be doing mailings to some of those communication channels, asking people to put up posters, offering to deliver workplace talks to their staff, even virtually, and making sure that they have a corporate no idling policy as per the one that the council has for its own employees. We are also looking to develop an additional partnership with the Mercury Theatre, because they provided the technical expertise to create the smoke-filled car for the launch event. But because at the moment it's a really struggling industry given the COVID situation, we're really keen to try and support some of the out of work actors and get them to help us to do some of the volunteer training that we're delivering to our increase of volunteers, to make sure that they're equipped to deliver the messages in the most effective way, but also, if required at time, manage some difficult relations that they may get from some of the motorists they're speaking to. And then also, as I've mentioned before, we've got a partnership with the Clinical Commissioning Group, and we're going to go and speak to their staff base in a couple of months. And with Colchester Mosque, it's really exciting because they want to do work targeting their worshippers, and they've already identified they have quite a few worshippers who are taxi drivers in the town centre, and so we're going to be doing some specific work with them. And then in terms of other activity, in terms of for extending the reach of the campaign, we're moving into 2021, planning a range of additional activities. So we're going to do another stunt, which will be similar to the smoke-filled car, but not a smoke-filled car. We are coming up with creative ideas at the moment, and that will be to create additional chatter factor and get media interest again, so we can have some additional coverage. And that will be supported with other additional ambient advertising. So as well as the billboard advertising and petrol pump advertising, we've currently got radio ad campaigns that are running, and we will be repeating that in spring next year. And then ongoing case studies of local people who can talk about the impact of air pollution on their health. So there's a wide range of different things still to come to complement what's already taken place. I hope that gives you a useful overview of the campaign, and we really hope that you will help us to spread the word amongst the residents in your ward and help to promote it through any contacts you may have with any key audiences, businesses, etc. So I'm now going to hand over to Emily, who's going to provide you with some details about the complementary signage project, encouraging people to switch off.
Thank you, Amy. So there isn't time tonight to go into a great deal of detail about the signage project, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview. So we have now received planning permission for the signage project, and signs are going to be going up at the top and the bottom of Brook Street and at the East Gates level crossing. We're recruiting a pool of research assistants who are going to be monitoring the number of engine switch-offs in each location. And they're also going to be wearing portable air quality sensors so that we can monitor the impact on local air quality in each different location. We're also in the process of finalising a university evaluation partner who's going to help us to implement the project and help us with the monitoring and the evaluation methodology side of things. So moving on to the messages. The messages on the signs are all based on psychological cues around social norms, self-efficacy and reflectiveness. And research has shown that these types of messages are effective through short-term trials. So the objective of our project is to test their effectiveness over a longer period of time of up to 18 months. And we'll also be exploring factors such as driver fatigue and whether there's a need for regular rotation of the messages to maintain behaviour change. So now that we've got the planning permission, we're aiming to have the project up and running by mid to late November. And as Amy said, this will complement the wider campaign. So thank you very much for listening. And now we'd be happy to accept any questions. Thank you.
Thank you all. Very helpful. Thank you, Amy and Emma, for coming along. Thank you, Belinda, and thank you, Emily, for finishing there. I was lucky enough to be at the launch and lucky enough to have seen some of this presentation already and to feel the enthusiasm that people have got for this project, whether in the public or as officers and representatives here tonight. So I thank you for what you've presented and what you're doing so far. A couple of things from me. I'm really happy about the focus on schools. I think that's really important, and I'd be very happy to see sort of more connection with the schools. And actually, we've got Richard Walker on the meeting tonight. Perhaps we can bring it up with him later about the connection between the 3PR scheme that the North Essex Partnership do, which is about improving parking and improving ways of getting to school that reduces car use and reduces pollution around schools. So I'd like to see how that connection occurs. So we are supporting the campaign that we have already in terms of 3PR, which is a borough led with the North East Essex Partnership campaign to go along with this one. And really, I suppose I just wanted to ask as well, how many volunteers have we signed up so far as part of the project to date? Thank you.
Rosie, can you answer that one about number of volunteers? And there's the stakeholders as well, isn't there?
Yeah, so we have 23 people signed up as volunteers and we have 32 people on a stakeholder list.
Thank you. And hopefully we can make that connection with the 3PR scheme. Do you think that will work, Belinda or Emily?
Yeah, we're aware of the 3PR scheme and certainly where it affects Colchester, because our project is aimed at Colchester. We will be there and we will be getting involving their recruited person in the training of our officers if we're allowed to, if Richard lets us.
I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will. Thank you. Councillors, I've used my chairman's privilege to just ask a few questions there. Are there any other questions for the presenters this evening? Councillor Gocher?
Yeah, just first of all, like to thank everyone involved with the project. I think it's obviously an excellent idea. I couldn't make the launch because I was at work, but it's fantastic stuff. The other, about a week or two ago, I spent a Sunday afternoon acting as a warden for this, with placards in Brook Street and Ipswich Road with a group of other people. And I've got a bit of feedback from that. One thought I had was that the signage, the orange signs, they work if the drivers are aware of what it means. So it was obvious that some of them have seen the excellent publicity in the Gazette and so forth. For the ones who hadn't, they just looked dumbfounded because it doesn't actually say at the top, turn off your engines. So I'm just wondering if we could have, whether wardens could have a kind of placard that is more direct to complement the ones that we've already got. Second bit of feedback, there was a council van. Actually, one of our borough council vans came down Brook Street, stopped, wouldn't turn off the engine, wouldn't engage with my colleague. So I'm just wondering how far we're educating our own staff, because obviously it doesn't look good if our own staff aren't going along with it. Third thing that I definitely noticed was that one of the things that drivers kept saying as a reason why they wouldn't turn the engines off is that they didn't know how long they'll be waiting. And partly this is an issue for Essex Highways, not for us, but I'm wondering why the traffic lights in this country in general don't actually say how many minutes it will be before they change. because if the drivers actually know they're there for a long haul, they're more likely to turn the engines off than if they think, oh, well, it's going to go in half a minute, so why bother? So but that's a wider issue. It's not really within our remit, probably.
Thank you, Councillor Goetcher. 3 good points there. The third one, as you say, probably not in our remit, but we could use it as a lobbying point. It would help. You see it in London now with pedestrian crossings and the time that you have to cross. So the 3 points, I think the first point was a useful one, Belinda.
Well, the third one, we did actually look into this one because it was raised by residents, just as Councillor Goetcher has picked up on it. Actually, residents also picked up on it. So we did do a feasibility study into whether these countdown timers would be possible, driver-facing countdown timers. And there is a little bit in the notes, the briefing notes that we forwarded. We found it was to do with Essex County Council and the type of the lights that are used, that it couldn't happen. And we spoke to the Transport Research Laboratory as well to see if there was anything. But that's something that we certainly have looked at, and whether the technology changes in the future. So that one we have done. Amy, the council vans, I mean, that is quite shocking. And certainly I've attended meetings with fleet managers with regard to educating staff. And I know there is a big campaign to follow. Now we've got formal adoption of the no vehicle idling policy from SMT, and I think that was only last week. So now we've got that. We will go forward with a much tougher stance, because actually, absolutely, you know, we have to be shown to be. Was not in our. We need to be in control of this. So. And Amy, could you answer the signage? I know we've been looking at signage, haven't we, in Brook Street particularly?
No problem. And just to echo what Belinda said, it's really important that obviously own house is in order. So we'll be, following up on ensuring that the new council's corporate policy actually gets adopted in practice. The point that you make is a very well made point about the signage, and the posters that we had were designed initially to go on notice boards in schools and in workplaces where people stand probably 50 to 70 centimetres away from them. And then what happened as we came to launch day is people wanted them to put up in their houses, in the windows along Brook Street and other areas where there's lots of idling. So we gave them out, but that wasn't their primary purpose. And in fact, as you rightly identify, they're not fit for that purpose because the text is too small for people to read it from several metres away. So there is an element of brand reinforcement that can come from those posters because of the bright yellow that I think, as you also rightly point out, if people have seen it elsewhere, they're like, oh, I know what that is. But if they haven't seen it for the first time, it doesn't make sense. So hopefully you'll be reassured to know that we are currently in production producing the posters with a much shorter, larger, bolder message, which is switch off your car engine when stationary, okay? And we are also producing more of the banners to go outside schools because we've already distributed all the ones that we had. So we're slightly victims of our own success so far, dare I say, but we are responding to that and we will continue to do so. So if you do have feedback like that, really helpful, please let us know and we will do our best to accommodate.
Thank you all. I've got some more questions to come, but I'm sure many of us would like to see banners in our local schools. Big yellow banners. Councillor McCarthy, I'm sure, would like to see some more of those. Robert Davidson, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, interesting presentation. I'm fully supportive of trying to reduce air pollution. It's a killer. And my support first for Councillor Goetcher. Those yellow signs are there's too wordy, absolutely too wordy. Secondly, they're in English. What about all our visitors, all the other people, all the delivery drivers that hardly speak English? Some of them, we need to have an air pollution zone sticker, simple as that. And then and then with a car with a engine, a red line across it or something. keep it simple is the answer. I was interested to know where you're targeting your work. Obviously, all those yellow signs, the switch off signs, all of them mention a roundabout. All of them mention traffic lights. But actually, the Mersey Road towards St Botolph's roundabout is one of our other hot spots for poor air. There's no traffic lights there. But actually, we need to try and improve the areas that are already bad. And I'm disappointed that you're not perhaps prioritising those 2 or 3 areas that we know are consistently for the last decade or more below the government guidelines. The other one I was thinking about was obviously your primary schools you've got, which is great because actually, again, children are more vulnerable. But the Tesco highs at rush hour, you've got all those university students crossing the traffic. But actually, why aren't we putting any signs or any warnings there? Sometimes you can wait there for 20 minutes before you can actually get to the roundabout. That's all, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Quite a few questions there. Challenges to Belinda and the team.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Mersey Road, the lower end. If air quality stays as it has done this year, it could be that the lower end of Mersey Road is the only area that exceeds the national guidance values this year. So yes, it is an issue. Part of the issue is the big wall, the bigger army wall that creates the canyon, which makes it really difficult to improve air quality in that area. But certainly it is an area we're looking at. With regard to the signage, we have the signage project, but it is the funding was very much focused on within our air quality management area, which is Brook Street, and Eastgate. So that's why those areas have been chosen. But it's not to say that it couldn't be extended if funding became available. And Amy, did you want to talk about how we've chosen the words on the signage and the branding?
I think the key additional question was really around translation of materials, because we are going to simplify the messages as per my previous response. But in terms of translations, we are looking into translating some of the materials, and we've already been working with a man at Colchester Mosque who is translating the materials into Urdu for us, because that's the he has told us that's the primary language that he thinks would be useful for his worshippers and for those taxi drivers. And we're also working with the council's own engagement officer who works with some of the minority ethnic groups to consider what other languages we ought to be producing things in when we're doing targeted work with particular audiences. So I hope that we've got that in hand for you.
Thank you. I think Robert would say that the common language as well was the symbol, if possible, if there could be something that was symbolically image based that could try and be used or developed during the project. I just wondered if you thought that was a good point that could be taken on board during the project.
We have a visual at the moment, which is the back of the car with the plume of smoke coming out. Maybe that's getting lost because of the number of words that are also around it. So we could look to see if we could simplify that, because we've had good feedback on that particular graphic. So I'd be keen to see if we can embed further use of that, and by bringing it to the fore in some of those bigger posters that we're now got underway.
Chairman, I'm sorry. The other point I was going to make was, what interaction are we having with the Essex County Council Highways Department, who ultimately will control the roads? They should really be cooperating, or at least working together for a long-term solution.
Belinda, we are working with them. And,
yeah,
and
absolutely. We
Thompson,
it's a difficult one, and because they are our transport authority, they're responsible for the roads and the infrastructure and the speed and so many things that we don't have control on. But I think this project is very much about influencing those things that as a borough we can. You know, the behavioural change, you know, signage. So it's those areas we can, whilst absolutely, and I know regular meetings are held with county and putting on pressure with regard to the infrastructure. So I think this is just one part of the council's work. And I know the transport and sustainability team do a lot on the infrastructure on the other side. So absolutely. It's an ongoing relationship to improve air quality.
Thank you, Belinda. I'll move to Peter, and then I've got Lee and Lorcan after that. Peter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, congratulations on a very successful campaign, but this has to be followed through in the long term. And I'm not sure that signs, I think they lose their impact after a while. And you're quite right, it's changing attitudes. I think we've got to get at the children as usual. And I hope we can have a long-term programme of anti-pollution. The volunteers that are being recruited, is this a fairly long-term project to have people for not just months, but for years doing this work? And are we going to continue working with schools on this? And my other point is that I'm not sure how this will affect heavy goods vehicle drivers. Those who are coming from elsewhere, is it feasible, for instance, for them to turn off their engines with these sorts of vehicles? I'm not sure, because they probably produce quite a lot of the pollution as well as the car drivers. I'll leave it at there. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you again, Belinda, please.
Thank you. Yes. Emily, did you want to come in with the questions around the signage? Are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I'm here. Sorry. Yeah, just to say about the signage. The signage is basically a trial, and we do want to explore this whole issue of driver fatigue and whether we need to like refresh and rotate the signs on a regular basis. And part of the project will be to actually explore how long it takes for drivers to get fatigued when they see a sign. So that's what our research assistants are going to be doing in each location. They're going to actually be counting the number of engines turning off, and we're going to be monitoring that each month to see whether it sort of goes up and down or whether it tails off after a period of time. And then we'll try rotating the sign. So given that we've got the sort of 18-month stretch, we'll get some good insight into how people respond to signage and whether it does need to be rotated longer term or shorter term even. So I think that is going to be really interesting to see that, because all those previous trials have always been really short, but this will give us an opportunity to really explore people's reactions to signs. Thank you.
So the volunteers will be active for 18 months, is that correct?
So there's two separate sides to this, I guess. There's the research assistants who are going to be monitoring switch offs, but then the volunteer side, where people are just going out in the community, focusing on their local areas, that is going to be built up over time to build the number of volunteers. And what we're trying to do is build up the capacity of the local volunteer group Clean Air Colchester, so that when the funding's finished and when we take a step back, the capacity of Clean Air Colchester is built up so that they can continue to build on the project over the longer term years, as you mentioned. And they've got the resources available, they've got the posters, they've got the banners, and then the community can basically take it on and build it up and develop it as they want to once we've sort of moved out of the picture because the funding is finished. Sorry, I know my internet's bad. I hope you heard that.
Yes, thank you, Emily. We got most of that. So it's going to be an enduring project with the volunteers carrying on afterwards once we've built up more capacity in the team. Belinda, did you just want to tackle an issue about schools? Peter was just saying, but I think it's clear we will be tackling education because that's the way to change minds?
I mean, part of this project very much focuses on the 4 schools within our air quality management areas, because, obviously we've got children who are living and walking to school through, areas that are polluted. So, we don't want that. So, we focus very much on those 4 schools. However, we have developed the toolkits and things that can be shared, and we have got the banners, and I agree. I think education and the pester power is a way forward. I think the project, because of COVID, I think schools is probably one area that's been hit, because we can't go into schools, so we're having to look at different ways of engaging with the schools. But certainly those schools that feed into the air quality management areas are really supportive of the projects. And I think the other question was about the HGVs. I think there's, perhaps sometimes they can't, but actually a lot of the time these HGVs can switch off their engines. And we did have an email from the Civic Society to say that the buses had improved since we started our campaign, which is nice to hear as well. So I think it's about everybody, switching off their engines when stationary.
Thank you, Belinda. And I think Amy and Emma said before about the frequently asked questions, so it would be good to check if HGVs are in there, but good to hear about buses as well. Thank you. I'll move on. Lee Scaldis, please. Lee.
Yeah, no, really good campaign. I think it's something that we can all do our part. It's something that can interest a lot of people at this time as well. I do agree with Mark, though, so Mark Gocher, Councillor Gocher, about the strapline. I do think we could make this simpler. As someone who drives, I'm usually concerned with getting from A to B. And sometimes you can have a look around when you're in traffic and you can see all those posters are up in Brook Street, but I know what those posters say. And it does remind me sometimes to switch off my engine. A lot of people, though, don't. They don't look at the Colchester social media. They don't read the Gazette. So they're not aware of what we're trying to do. And although I think the design is great, I do wonder if we want something quite simpler, such as, I don't know, turn off your engine, help the environment, save on petrol, anything like that to encourage people to do that. Sometimes you have to tell people it's in their self-interest, such as it damages their engine, keeping it on static for so long, and it wastes so much petrol. But I don't know if we want to look at that again. I say I quite like the design, but I don't know if it's the right messaging to hit home. But then obviously we're looking at more signage, which is great. I think that is needed in key areas, just to remind people. Couple of questions I had. How many schools have we got on board, and are there any in high pollution areas that are not engaging? And also, second question is, what's our relationship with Essex County Council on this? Because they're doing their safer, greener, sustainable kind of idea. Are we working with them on this? Because it seems like they should interlink perfectly. They're looking at modal shift, we're looking at air quality. It kind of seems that we should be doing a lot of collaborative work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. That last question we have kind of answered already. We are working hand in hand with the county council. We have the monitoring need. We have to do that as part of our responsibility, but most of the other responsibilities are the county council. And I tried to mention earlier that Jane Thompson is on the call for later when we talk about the SGH, the Safer, Greener, Healthier with the County Council, and it is brought up at the meetings that we have with them. So we are ensuring it does dovetail in, it has to, but I'm sure officers can just double down on that fact and continue to mention it. I know Emily, I think in particular, has been on the meetings that I've been involved with as part of the team. Belinda, do you want to take any of those other points, please?
Amy, did you want to talk about the simpler strapline request?
Yes, sure. So we're going to have a meeting with the campaign advisory group, which has got representatives from local residents and some of those other stakeholder groups to have a kind of debrief meeting after the launch with them. And I think we should take it to them and see if we can work with them to consider ways in which we can simplify. As I've said, we are already simplifying the message for the new materials that are being produced, and there will be far fewer words on them. And I would hope that that would look to address it. And given that it's going to be going out much more broadly, you'll get that kind of element of repetition and build that will come. But I do take the point about when people are coming to it for the first time that we need to keep it really simple for them. I totally endorse that. And I think you're absolutely right about the fact that people are one kind of relatively mercenary, and actually it's about self-interest as opposed to altruism. And that's partly why we've gone down the health route with the messaging, because that's much clearer that it is then about a personal benefit to them as opposed to just a benefit to the environment. The myths and facts, as Emma said, do address quite a lot of those things, comments you've made around the impact on the engine, on petrol consumption, etc. So as part of the additional work we're planning, we are intending to ensure that we promote those myths and facts more broadly, and that's all part of the build of the messaging that we've got coming over the course of the next couple of months.
Can I just add, this is Emma, just want to add also that we are producing some infographics which to accompany those common myths and facts, which are very simple pictorials, which then have some information around that. So we will be sending those out for people to share on their social media channels. Again, it's all part of kind of building that brand awareness and being able to see that car and that imagery and recognise that that's part of the No Idling campaign. So just to say that the complementary social media activity is in the pipeline as well.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, Belinda, you'd already explained about the schools. Do you just want to say that again?
I'm not aware of any schools that haven't engaged with us, particularly those that are within the air quality management area are particularly keen. Rosie, did you want to talk about the school's work?
Yeah, there is one school, and I hope it's okay for me to mention, but there is a school on our list that we would like to engage with that we have had trouble getting in touch with, and that is St Thomas More's. They're one of our 4 key schools. So if anyone has got a link into there, we'd be really grateful. We're obviously sending them the materials and getting in touch with them, but we just haven't had as much luck with them as with the other schools. Our other school target schools, St George's, St John's Green and St James's, we're working very closely with, and we have other schools that we're closely working with as well, but I would have to send an email around after with a list of the schools, because I don't know them all off the top of my head, but it's definitely a priority. And could I just also, sorry if it's all right, just add something on the previous point. In regards to the messaging, when we did our public engagement at the start of the year, we were really trying to explore what people's motivations would be, what is the thing that would make them switch off their engines. And I think over everything, so we did ask them about the fuel savings and the environment savings. It was the kind of health messages that people felt most strongly about. So that's why we kind of focused on the health angle.
Thank you, Rosie. I think it's worth just repeating that we did a lot of investigation first, didn't we? So this is driven by what people of Colchester have said through our research and through surveys of people of Colchester. I think I filled out the survey, probably many other councillors did. Any other comments before I go back to the last? Oh no, 2 speakers to go. Councillor Nigel Chapman and then Councillor Lorcan Whitehead. Were there any other points just before I go to them? No? Okay, Nigel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just some clarification, really. I think I may be asking for repetition, but just so I get it in my own mind. Belinda mentioned the buses are improving. I just wonder if we have actually, haven't got this, whether we have spoken to the bus companies or whether it's just the drivers doing it themselves. That's my sort of first question. Second question was around schools. Now, I can understand why we're pointing this very much in the urban area, which I assume we are. But I just wondered if anything was going out to the rural schools, because I do know I've had 1 or 2 points about cars idling outside village schools. So just useful to know whether anything is being done now. But I can understand, as I say, why if it isn't at the moment. And excuse me. And the other question I got was with my Colchester Homes hat on. I assume Colchester Homes are part of this as well.
Thank you, Nigel. Who's going to take those questions again? Belinda, I'll come to you if you want to then navigate around.
With Colchester Borough Homes, certainly they were involved in the no idling policy initially. I'm not sure if we've got them or they've had time to this time. Emily, are you able to answer that?
Yes, they've been provided with all the materials via there because they're members of the Colchester Travel Plan Club. So we've been supplying them with all the materials for the project and the campaign. I don't think they have finalised their no idling policy yet, but it was something that they were looking at and were willing to adopt. So we can follow that up and check what the position is with that. But certainly they have got all the materials, so they've been, they're fully informed of what's happening with the campaign.
I'll certainly follow up on that as well.
Thank you.
And with regard to schools, certainly we are focusing on the urban area, but if there's any schools within your area that are interested, if they contact us, we'll certainly send them out all the campaign material and have conversations with them about how they can take the project forward.
Yeah, and the toolkit, just to say that the toolkit is obviously available for any school to use, and the toolkit materials are very much focused on Colchester. We've tried to make it as local as possible, but we would hope to see all schools in the Colchester area, including the rural schools, doing some activity. But in terms of our proactive approach, we are having to focus our limited time resource on those ones in the urban area, but all the materials are available to anybody else, and we will kind of react to any requests that come from them. And in terms of the bus companies, Emily, I don't know, or Rosie, whether there's it, because there was some additional early work that took place before we got started. We've got them on the list of some of the businesses for the ongoing work, but I don't know what conversations have happened to date. So I don't know if Emily or Rosie can speak to that.
Yes, I can give an update on that. We did, before we launched the project, we had a lot of, before COVID basically, we had a lot of liaison with the bus companies. The quarterly bus operator meeting was happening then with Essex County Council, and we had a number of discussions with the bus companies about whether it was feasible for buses to turn their engines off. Some of them did already have a no idling policy. Some of them were interested, but it depended on the age of the buses, whether it was practical to do that. We have had some further discussions with Essex County Council about approaching the bus operators at the moment, because the bus operator meetings aren't happening at the moment. And obviously the bus operators have been badly hit by COVID and obviously are still kind of in crisis management. So we're sort of liaising with Essex County Council about the best way to approach the bus companies. And obviously it was discussed at leadership as well. And I know there was a lot of interest in the bus companies. And Councillor Corey, you offered to send a letter to the bus companies. So I think it'd be really interesting to work with you on that and how we approach it, I guess in the most appropriate way, given the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Nigel, for those questions. And thank you, Emily, for that reminder of the letter I need to send. Thank you. Last but not least, Lorcan, please.
Thank you. I seem to be having some internet issues tonight. It's cut out twice already, so hopefully you can hear me and it won't cut off. Yes, I mean, I think, you know, really good, important campaign. I've had this stuff through actually from my daughter's school, so I can confirm that some of that's coming through, and some good materials. I'm another one who thinks that thought about the title was maybe not quite kind of Ron Seal enough, saying what it doesn't, what it's doing, what it says on the tin, and so I'm kind of pleased to hear from Belinda that there might be some changes around some of that messaging. But I think, you know, it's very nice and bright. I think that image with the exhaust, I think, conveys the message pretty well. So I think that's good. And I think the myth busting questions, I think as well, was something that I thought was really effective, because they are, you know, lots of the things that people come back with. And actually, I was in the car with someone the other day, a couple of weeks ago, I think, and saw one of the signs and was having exactly that conversation where they were saying, you know, if I turn off my engine, turn it back on again, doesn't it use more fuel? So I think that's really, really useful. My kind of one question was around the traffic lights and the we can't have the countdown timer, unfortunately, but it seems there's another option. I was just wondering, do we have Essex County Council support to actually implement that if the option does prove to be feasible? What are the chances of us actually having that installed on our traffic lights, and would it just be at kind of problem areas, or would it be rolled out all over the place?
Thank you, Lorcan. And surely on that last point, we could, if we know that each traffic light is, it's 45 seconds to wait coming down East Hill to Brook Street, or if it's, surely we could put at least an estimation of a sign on there, but just ideas. But thank you. And Belinda, if you could just tackle those last few questions.
I think the issue is that the ones, there's these scoot ones where they alter the timing depending on the traffic flow, so they're not fixed. If they were fixed, it would be different, but they're not. And that is the issue, is that at peak times, school drop-off times, they alter the flows timing. So that's why. Did you want to say any more, Rosie? Because you've looked at those.
Yeah, I've been in close contact with John at Essex County Council about the traffic lights. So I've been speaking to both him and the Transport Research Laboratory, who actually developed the software that operates on our traffic lights. And we've explored various different options to do with different timings and software that can link the traffic lights to a message board that gives people an indication. And I think because it's we'd need planning permission, we'd need permission from the Department of Transport, and I think that's where the sticking point would be. And also it would be very expensive, both for a short-term trial and for the long-term costs going forward, just to have one sign. And it just, I mean, we've thoroughly explored this, and I can happily share any information with anyone to do with the lights, but yeah, it just doesn't seem to be something that we can do. But the traffic light technology is changing all the time, and there's lots of things coming up that can predict pollution levels and adjust the timing of the lights accordingly, and I'm sure Essex are on top of that. But yeah, if anyone's got any traffic light questions, I feel like I'm a bit of an expert on the whole traffic light thing now, so I can share any information if you need.
Thank you, Rosie. I think it's a green light from us to pass it round to councillors, any information, just so that we've got that in our back pocket.
Yeah,
that'd be helpful. Thank you. Thank you all then. Lots of questions, more than I realised, to really probe on this project. I think because it's a good project, we want to make sure it achieves as much as possible and cleans our air in Colchester. So thank you all for coming. We will now let you go and not have to journey too far home. So thank you. We'll move on, and there's no vote needed, Matthew, on this really, is there? It's just an update. So we'll move on to the next item. And the next item was the original item 7, which is on community engagement. So climate emergency and community engagement. And I'll go to Ben Plummer to introduce this item to the panel, please.
Yeah, I'll just bring up my screen and we can go to the report. Here we go. Okay, so yes, this is item 7 or 8, now in the new order. Climate emergency and community engagement. I think the new order has actually suited this because the previous item on the air quality project obviously had a significant focus on community engagement as part of its a part of the project. I think we acknowledge, so we declared the climate emergency as a council last year, and I think since then there hasn't been a strong focus on community engagement on the climate emergencies. It's as a broad topic. We've had little engagements related to the environment, the air quality project. Most recently, things like the town deal that's involved sort of improvements, asking sort of residents for improvements around the town centre in terms of sustainability. We think it's time now to look at doing a more in-depth basic community engagement around the climate emergency declaration. So this paper essentially sets out a series of approaches that could be taken by the council, gives a bit of detail about what they are, a few sort of advantages and disadvantages, considerations to be made around them. And at the end of the, after I've presented all of these, it's not actually on the paper, but we've come up with a suggested package of community engagement that we suggest that we sort of do as a council, and it combines a couple of the approaches that will be described. So if we just scroll down to this bit. So a key sort of principle within sort of the council's community engagement now is to follow a asset-based community development approach. I think this has been well demonstrated actually with the what they've been doing with the Clean Air for Colchester project, so I won't touch on it too much, just to say it's a approach that kind of values communities, recognises their skills, knowledges and motivations, and how this can sort of drive forward projects. And it shouldn't be us as a council just putting stuff on them. It should be putting them sort of front and centre of the problems that really concern them. So I'm going to start by essentially introduce each of them and then sort of go through, give a few examples of what other local authorities have done. And so we're going to start with the resident consultation. So there's a few approaches around here, and I'll go through each of them in turn. So a survey is probably the more sort of traditional sort of way that's been done, to essentially understand residents' attitudes and behaviours related to climate change. Could be done online or in person. And quite a good example of this was done by Leeds City Council. They did a sort of a large scale questionnaire that went out to several thousand residents and got responses. And it also fitted into a wider climate conversation they had, where they used some other engagement approaches as well. Some other options are sort of creating a online platform for residents to actually suggest ideas. So rather than us asking the questions to residents, they kind of put the ideas to us, and that kind of has its advantages as they can put their idea forward and other people can then upvote their ideas. So it shows sort of majority sort of coming forward and support for ideas. I've included an example here of Cheshire West Council. So I'll just bring this up quickly just to show you kind of what this looks like, or what it could look like as an example of this sort of forum aspect. So they've got this on the website. You can just post an idea and people can upvote it. I'm not going to click on them, but you can get the idea of what people are suggesting, and people can put this heart button to this one, for example. And so there's that approach. A slightly more sort of focused approach that could be used is a form of heat mapping, so where residents can pinpoint ideas on a map, and similar to the forum approach, people can support that and give comments in relation to the ideas that are being posed. And this is obviously quite targeted. It can be useful for topics, things like transport and planning, which are very sort of geographically focused. So again, I'll just show you an example of what a software looks like. I've mentioned this software called Commonplace, which is quite a common one that's used by councils. So this is an example from Bristol. They used it to where residents could basically identify bugbears or problems, basically in relation to transport mainly. So residents can put a comment like this, for example. Probably not that good an example actually, but they can do that, and then people can upvote comments like that one there, and basically the council can pick up on that and they can sort of get a synthesis of all these responses, see which ones are most popular. That's quite a good way to sort of target certain areas first. And the other one I've looked at is participatory budgeting, which is a bit more niche, and basically another way to identify residents' priorities around a particular topic, in this case climate change. And it's quite a good tool at enabling residents to understand the trade-offs of decision making that the council has to make. Within the other two sort of approaches, sort of forum-based things, you could get residents suggesting ideas that sort of come off the top of their head without any sort of thinking. But in real life, there's multiple trade-offs and you can't do everything, and things are going to be more effective than others. So I'm just going to bring up an example here. This is an example of a software that could be potentially used. It was used by the London Borough of Redbridge, and it basically gave residents this challenge of assigning a carbon budget for the council, and gave them opportunities to select from different activities. So they've got transport, waste, property, energy, all these sort of things, and they can basically spend these points on different activities they want the council to do. They have this budget of 55 points here, and they can sort of do the sliding scale, and it says sort of the consequences of their action. You can go into quite a bit of detail with that, but obviously with the budget, it gives you that you can only do so much, and it also says out how certain things interact, and you can sort of customize that approach. And so, as I said here, for all of these approaches, they're quite online based, and I think that's been researched in light of COVID-19, and that there might be a limit on in-person engagement. So an online element will have to be sort of key, I expect, but there will definitely be a focus on ensuring that residents who may lack access to digital methods can get the help that they need to do that. And there will also be other alternatives for doing this in person or postally. We'll skip through. I took quite a lot of time on that one, so we'll just skip through most of these now. Citizens' assemblies, probably know mostly about these, where groups of people are invited to sort of a set of workshops to debate a question. So, for example, the UK recently held a national one around this, the UK government, around climate change. How should the UK meet its target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions? And basically sets of experts and professionals in those different working areas can speak to residents about these issues. And this has also been done by a number of local authorities as well, as listed in the document. And maybe a note to say on this one is that they're normally done in person. Brighton are currently doing one actually, which is online. And if we were to look at this sort of approach, we'd probably have to talk quite extensively with other people to see how this could be done online, because I think it lends itself more to an in-person engagement. Next one we've got on here is about organisational climate change network. So I think that this is a sort of recognising that joining up sort of thinking and knowledge from different organisations within the borough will help to produce sort of a wider action, this collective action. It's been done by several councils already, such as Leeds, Croydon and Lincoln. And it basically, yeah, it's just a good way of spreading best practice and taking sort of wider action rather than people doing it individually. And I think we've seen this in Colchester. We've got the One Colchester group, who are primarily been set up as a way to sort of protect community safety and empower the community to tackle issues affecting them. And we've put forward an approach here to create a subgroup of the One Colchester group to focus on simply climate change issues and environmental issues. And this was on the back of a One Colchester strategic board meeting that the council presented at, where we gave some sort of information about what the council is doing to tackle climate change and sustainability. And the chair of the group suggested that it might be quite a good idea to create a subgroup of the One Colchester group to focus on climate change. And this would be a really good opportunity to engage with some of the residents who we sort of seldom heard in some of the discussions in general, but also around climate change, and it would help to sort of complement approaches such as resident consultations to sort of reach more residents with those methods. And then the final approach I've got on here is creating a subgroup or subgroups to the Environment and Sustainability panel. It's a similar idea to a climate change network, except that work done by the subgroup would feed into the Environment and Sustainability panel, and you'd hear about that, and they'd be accountable to that. And yeah, that's an overview. I didn't want to spend too much time, but happy to take questions to sort of expand on what I've said. we think it's important that this participation is inclusive with as many residents as we can be. I think as it sort of outset, participation aims to be inclusive, but it can unintentionally be exclusive as well, just depending on what methods that you're using. I think we'd look at previous engagement studies that we've done, seeing how they've been effective at reaching sort of broader diversities of residents. And I've been speaking to people within the air quality team about the engagement they did and different methods they've used and the style that they've used to do this to influence how we do this as a council. But as I mentioned, the package of approaches, this isn't on the paper, but what we're suggesting as a starter package is a combination of a resident-wide sort of survey to understand residents' attitudes and behaviours related to climate change. So attitudes in terms of sort of how their degree of concern around climate change, knowledge of climate change, and then behaviours, exploring both what residents do now, what kind of environmental behaviours they engage in now, what they'd be willing to do, maybe if they had more information, or if the council could facilitate it better, and understanding that sort of thing so we can improve our service to residents so that it's easier for them to tackle climate change themselves. So that's the one approach. And then the other approach we're looking at is this organisational climate change network, as I suggested, creating this subgroup to the one Colchester group to tackle climate change sort of collectively within those organisations. So that's the main sort of outline. The rest of the detail is kind of in the paper, but I'm happy to take further questions on it as well.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. I think we've all had a good look at the paper, and we have discussed this at an earlier briefing, some of us representing the different groups on the panel. I'll just put forward some of my thoughts, and I'll go to Peter, Sam, Lee, Rory, and Robert after that. So for me, I think it's really important, as you touched on at the end, to engage as many as possible on a wide, diverse range of people across Colchester, because often when we do engagement as a council, we end up hearing the loudest voices or the most educated voices, the ones who are able to access and understand the council immediately. But we need to bring people forward who do have a voice, who do want to take part, or at least don't know it yet, but we need to encourage them. So I'd very much be happy to do whatever we think is the best from our behaviour change and research so far. And I do think a baseline understanding of survey is good, so we get that understanding of what people know on the climate emergency so far, and what they understand their behaviours, how they impact climate and Colchester locally. So I'd definitely be up for that. We talked about the fact that we have One Colchester is a really useful, effective body. So thank you, Ben, and others for coming to present at that recently. I sit on that board, and I think it would be really useful to continue on with that organisational step, as you talked about, to move things forward. And I made a suggestion at the briefing that perhaps the chair, whoever that is, me at the moment, and the deputy chair of this panel, currently Peter, but whoever that is, be automatically on that forum as organisational representatives of this panel to move things forward. I'd say one more thing, that we did do a citizens' assembly. I unfortunately was not in the country when it happened, but prior or just around the emergency that we declared in 2018. So I think, Lorcan, you spoke there and you'd be able to feedback on that, but that was good, and we had feedback. We got the organisers to come and speak to our task and finish group then, so that was helpful. But I think actually in this climate that's unlikely to happen now. But I do like the idea of some of the really open consultation portals that you showed us that can really get people's ideas out there, although they would need to be tightly managed to say, well, actually we're doing that, or actually we can't do that, and this is what we can do. So those are my contributions, I think. So thank you. I'll move on to Peter Chillingworth next, then Sam, then Lee, then Rory, then Robert, then Lorcan. So Peter, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ben, for your presentation and all the work that must have gone into preparing it. I think we ought to be very clear on why we want to engage before we decide how we do it. Because really there are two strands to this, I think. There's what the council is doing and what we are doing with the Carbon Trust, etc., where we should be explaining to our residents what we're doing to take them with us. Because there's a lot of resources being put into this by the council, and they are the residents, they are the taxpayers, they ought to know what we're doing, and we want their approval. And if we're not doing it as they want, we want their feedback. And the other side is on the broader, the whole borough. We have a national programme of trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And I feel that the council should be playing its part to change culture, to engage, and to explain about the need for the various actions that will be necessary to achieve that. So I think we've got to bear those in mind when we decide how we engage. I do agree with you, Chairman, that the one Colchester sounds a good thing to be doing, because we'll be working with the bigger organisations who perhaps have influence and have clout and need to be moved along, perhaps, and taken with us in our journey. And also the people themselves, the general public, our residents, we need them to be on side. And I think that's when the assemblies perhaps come in, and also the surveys perhaps, as long as it's properly targeted and properly organised. But those are my initial thoughts, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think at the moment we'll collect thoughts and then come back to Ben at the end. Thank you. Sam, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And I concur with you wholeheartedly on your approach to community engagement. Like the good Liberals that you and I both are, you simply cannot bring people with you on such an important journey if you don't enable them. So ultimately, the key to success is to engage the community in whatever way we can, the best possible way that we can. And we only know too well, all of us, how vocal residents can be on social media platforms. So perhaps creating an online platform is the perfect solution for many of these residents to be able to kind of voice their concerns and help us identify the issues that are most important to them on this journey. If we're just collecting thoughts, I will leave out some questions, but if I may just chuck a couple in with regards to the online platform, because I do agree that that is certainly one of maybe 2 or 3 methods that we need to run with. Do we know how costly setting up an online platform would be? Obviously, it's going to take a little while to be able to develop an online platform. And Ben, I don't know if you're going to know this at all. With regards to Redbridge and how they did it, do we have any idea what sort of level of engagement they had, the sort of responses that they had as well? I think I'll leave it there and let others speak. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. We'll collect those and come back to you. Thank you. Lee, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you again, Ben, for a very comprehensive report. I think on the resident consultation, I would very much favour the examples we saw from Bristol and Redbridge, where they're quite easy to use, they're very visible, and people can see what others have said, but hopefully don't put their names to keep it private. But I feel that's a really good way of engaging residents rather than just a simple Google form kind of format that can be quite boring. Also, it's people like to see what other people are talking about. So there is that option where they can see other comments and listen to other views without the kind of Facebook getting into arguments. Citizens' assemblies as well. It's been trialled, obviously, put places here. Camden have been very successful at it as well, although they were hit by COVID, so that was delayed slightly. I think we have to think about how we deal with that. Do we end up with people who are just interested in the green issue, or is it like jury service where 2 or 3 people don't really want to be there and it doesn't contribute? So I think we need to maybe talk to other local authorities about how they decided who's going, because we don't want it just to be a Extinction Rebellion conversation. We want it to include people who disagree with them and look at it from a different perspective. My only worry about the kind of one Colchester idea is we mentioned some groups like Eco Colchester who are on Facebook. That's fine, I'm a member of their group, but there seems to be a lot more talking than actually doing. And I just worry that if we chuck money at groups like that, we don't actually see the end results. So for me, I'd prefer to go down the idea of the residents' consultation and looking at citizens' assemblies to bring people with us. So that would be my thoughts on that one, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. I understand your concerns there. I would say that the One Colchester group have really delivered in supporting lives and livelihoods during COVID. And I think I understand what you say. It can be a worry about organisational networks just talking, but trust me, I think that would be a good way, only as part of the options supplemented by the other real connections with the public. But that's about organisational movement. And I think Peter might have said about that, how important it is to get the big movers and shakers to influence their staff, their employees, and the people they engage with. Thank you. I've got Rory, please. Rory Doyle.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to make a couple of points, please. In pulling the paper together, I think we had a very clear steer from the panel and the previous task and finish group that we have to have a mechanism by which we can engage with community groups, experts, stakeholders, and others, and that this forum probably wasn't the right place to do that. So I think, we were looking, weren't we, at having a separate subgroup. And I think the actions that we've seen recently, certainly the engagement that Ben and others have had with the One Colchester strategic partnership, there's a ready-made network there that is already bubbling up in terms of its ambition, its want to do something here. And it strikes me as a real opportunity. And going back to the asset-based community development approach, I think we should look to look and shine a light on networks that exist already. So I think in presenting that to you as a panel, that feels like a really strong thing that we could possibly get moving with quite quickly, and then we can begin to have those conversations, which I know you are so keen to do. I think the wider work around understanding baseline, people's attitudes, wider resident survey. Again, the paper there was just to give you a flavour. Ben's done a considerable amount of research in terms of best practice from other authorities. As has already been pointed out by one panel member, there is of course a cost, and in terms of managing expectations on that, what we will need to do, and I think what we propose to do, is come back to you with some costed models based on the feedback that we get tonight, so we can give you a bit of a flavour at a further meeting and work up some models in a bit more detail. So that was the purpose of structuring the paper in that way.
Thank you, Rory. That's really helpful on both of your points. Agree with the first, and the second one's really helpful. Thank you. So we'd welcome that, I think, so we know exactly what we're dealing with, the detail and the cost. Thank you. Robert, please, you're next. Robert Davidson. Robert, are you still on the call, and are you off mute? I can see you. You're not. You're still on mute, so you're not off mute yet.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Residents' consultation. I'm conscious that obviously it's interesting to find which age group, if you like, has got the most interest in climate change, and of course we all ought to contribute to the improving the planet, but actually the ones that are going to be affected most are the young children. And I just wonder whether we target perhaps the PTA or the parents at both preschool and primary schools, and actually just engage with the children themselves, because those parents are going to be far more interested and concerned than the majority of our residents. And at the end of the day, if you get youth behind you with more enthusiasm and energy, you might get more success. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I think, yeah, hopefully everyone will be impassioned about it, but you're right, obviously we have to, like the Air Quality Project, get them young and educate them from the start. And I'll move to Lorcan Whitehead, please. He was talking about his young one. Oh yeah, Lorcan.
Thank you. Yeah, who is very engaged on this issue, and I mean I would second that. You know, I think you know, if there was something we could do around schools and a particular kind of consultation around young people engaging in some way. I mean, they're great at bringing things home to their parents as well. So I think it is a good way to sort of to use existing networks that we have in schools and things like that to disseminate ideas in the community. Yeah, I mean, I would say just running through the sort of the options. I mean, I think that I would support the sort of one Colchester approach. I think that's a really important thing to do. I think we are going to have to work across partners, and it is important that we bring some of these larger organisations with us and encourage them to do their bit as well. And so I think that's really important. And using that network, I think, is a really good thing to do. And I think there was a sort of contrasting option with having a subgroup of this panel, and I think that for me would be the wrong way to go, because I think it's not about us leading everything, and we probably aren't in a position to do all of that, but it is about us being a kind of key partner across the borough with other partners. With the residents consultation, I mean, my basic thoughts are kind of the things that really matter, I think, are things that people have already mentioned, making sure that we have diversity in terms of the people that we speak to, but also making sure we kind of speak to as many people as possible, and that it's something that as many people are kind of aware of is happening as possible. Using kind of some of these more engaging models, I think, you know, I think it's got to be engaging, hasn't it? So those are my sort of thoughts, and it'd be kind of interesting to hear more about the costings and things. But that would be sort of in terms of my priorities. Those are the things I think we should be focusing on. Also, I'm sort of wondering about timeframes. So I wonder if there are options that, I mean, it looks like some of these could be kind of things that take a longer amount of time. And are there other options that are also that we could run maybe as well that would give us information a bit quicker and allow us to maybe start taking action sooner? So that might be a benefit as well. And then on the citizens' assemblies, I mean, I think for me, and obviously a lot of this is going to come down to cost and things as well. And, you know, it's we're going to want to do everything, may not be able to, but I do think that having an option where it has that more kind of discursive element where people can get into conversations and discuss things and explore ideas and really kind of work out what they think about issues, I think is really important, because obviously the danger otherwise is that, you know, we end up shaping things quite a lot otherwise without that element. So I think if we can pursue you know, something in that area, you know, like a citizens' assembly, something like that, that gives people an opportunity rather to really kind of develop their own thoughts and feedback their own thoughts without it kind of necessarily being shaped so much by us and the questions that we're asking, then I think that is a really positive thing for us to do if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorcan. Some good points there as well. So I have Mandy to come in, and then I'll go back to Ben just to summarise some of those factors. And I think we'll reach a consensus on the way to go. Mandy, please.
Yeah, there's just a couple of things to pick out. I think some points around, you know, what we're trying to do and how we're trying to understand. So I think there's three broad areas. There's a kind of insight and understanding piece, which is around, you know, the survey and how we're trying to get that information from people. So thinking about what barriers there are to participation, but also what barriers there are to action as well. I think secondly, there's the sort of wider piece around ongoing engagement. So actually, how do we keep people participating and how do we listen to them? And I think Councillor Whitehead said about, you know, actually getting people involved. So that's the ABCD approach. And then there's the behaviour change, the sort of outgoing communication that sort of triggers people. So I think those are the three broad areas that we're looking at. And we're looking at different ways of looking at the broader issues and trying to get that information out there. But also there are specific actions, and Councillor Chillingworth mentioned, getting the right methods for the right type of message that we need out there for those individual actions. And I think that's very important that we target that. So what we're looking to do is take all this information and think about how we then cost it in terms of feasibility, and work potentially with One Colchester and with the team to develop some kind of communications and broader engagement plan that takes into account those issues.
Thank you, Mandy. And the last point you make, working with One Colchester, I think enables us to do that better communication, because we're working with 10, 12 other organisations that we can communicate out with, and that we're motivated by the ABCD approach, which is communities, grassroots, up. So we won't be doing to people, we'll be doing it with them. Thank you. Ben, back to you. I think there's a combination of everything wanted, really. But I think most people do agree with the baseline survey, the One Colchester style approach, but also then a forum-based approach going forward after that. So back to you just to summarise, Ben, if you could, please.
Yeah, so great to hear all that feedback. I noted down there was a few little questions I might clear up. So Councillor McCarthy mentioned about the London Borough of Redbridge's what engagement that had. I looked on the website today and they haven't published anything about it yet. I could easily get in contact with them though. That ended in August, 31st of August, so it's quite recent, but you might be able to get something from that if you wanted to. I really take the point about the forums being a really good idea, because I think I tried to get that across as something that's been brought up here about, I think Councillor Whitehead mentioned it, about us as the council not structuring the conversation as much and trying to let residents give that more open view. And as we know that us all as residents, we all have ideas and concerns, and that's a good way to get them more organically rather than us trying to structure it to what we necessarily want. And I think we need to hear not just what we want, because we all have our own. It's good to basically get other people's opinions, because we all think differently, and we need to be a bit open about this and hear some more different approaches that we wouldn't sort of necessarily come across we schools engagement, I think that would be really good to link up with maybe things that their quality project are doing around their schools work. We are pursuing a project with the University of Essex to work with schools and creating some climate action plans for them, which is in sort of the early stages, so I won't go into too much detail, but if anyone wants to, councillor, send me an email. I'm happy to give some further information about that project and how that could potentially link in. I think a lot of the other questions have actually been sort of picked up as well around sort of the purpose of doing this. I think it's to, as I said, to understand these baseline attitudes and behaviours, as it's something we haven't done on a great deal before, but it's also to get support for approaches that we'd like to do. I think a forum or a survey would allow that, to understand what people would like, to get that buy-in, so we have evidence supporting whatever approach that we go with. I think that's probably all I have to say, I think. And if there's anything else, because there's quite a few questions, I tried to write them all down, but if there's anything else I haven't picked up, then feel free to fire it back.
Thank you. Please do raise your hand if there was any questions that we didn't tackle there, but thank you, Ben. So hopefully we have a steer from the panel about how we want to go forward. As I've said, the One Colchester partnership had most support across the panel as one option, provided alongside that would be baseline understanding first, and then something along the lines of the Redbridge example that we were talking about that allows a bit more open forum and discussion. And if we could then have more detail about, okay, how we progress those, as Mandy Jones was talking about, the feasibility, costs, etc., I think we'd all be able to then narrow it down and support those options going forward, and actually engage one or two of those methods of participation. Okay, if you feel I haven't summarised it correctly there, please do put your hand up and chip in. Otherwise, I would say, Matthew, is there anything we need to vote on there, or Are you satisfied with that consensual approach that we've given to Ben for the minutes?
No, Chair, I think you summed it up there. The consultation, the citizen assemblies, and the one Colchester group are the favoured methods going forward. I think if the committee are able to assent to those and then receive further feedback from officers in the future, that will deal with this item. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. So are we all happy that those sort of three methods are the ones we focus on? One, Colchester, it needs less focus, but baseline consultation, and then another type of forum going forward that we want to research. Okay, I see nods. I don't see any dissent. So thank you. That's agreed. Thank you, Ben, for all the work on that and the work coming up on that as well. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. We will move on. Now we get to the parking item, I believe. Yeah, so the positive parking review. Sorry, Richard, we've been going for quite a while, but over to you. I'm sure you'll succinctly put it to us and explain where you are with this. I know that COVID has disrupted it slightly, but over to you, Richard. Please put forward the positive parking review.
Thank you. The highlight of the evening. Right, hopefully you can see the screen there. I've got a few slides to share to tell you how we got to the place we're at. I'm working this in almost a consultative capacity as part of the North Essex Parking Partnership for Rory as the sponsor from Colchester Borough. Positive parking strategy. Why positive? This is one of the first in the country to follow this template, and it's quite easy to say negative things about parking, as we all know, but more difficult to say things that are positive. What we do want you to do is go and park in a car park rather than on the street, and we want you to come in at certain times and avoid the peaks. I'll take you through some of the places that the study has gone, and we'll lead through to some of the environmental impacts as part of the outcomes. Now, the strategy itself is going to be presented to Cabinet in November, so I'll touch on where we've come from and what we're going, and some of the outcomes that you'll be interested in, but to say the full strategy won't be published until November now. So right at the very start, we contacted the BID for their support, and they put together a transport paper which we included into the preparatory work. We had a large public survey, both face-to-face and online, back in February 2019. Over 460 responses to that, so quite representative of what people were thinking. And alongside that, we've had some workshops with comparisons with other areas, what innovations and ideas, no boundary sort of thinking can we do. Both of those were back in early 2019. We've conducted a desktop exercise, and we had a lot of previous surveys as well, especially with origin and destination, that's O&D, information in them back from 2007, and we've repeated that with the current survey there. There's a lot of other research that we've done around legislation, what is possible, what we can do. We brought through some of the previous car parking during regeneration work, some private non-residential studies for parking. That's the sort of parking that you get between those little alleyways and under the little alcoves in places behind offices and things, particularly in the town centre core. We've got some information about that, but just a lot of data on capacity and churn, usage costs, figures, all those sorts of things. Now, the origin destination information is quite interesting from the 2007. It's not that far distant in the more up-to-date stuff that we've got, with most of the people who use Colchester's car parks live in the borough. That's probably bad news if you're coming in at peak times, because most of the people who live in the borough are contributing to the congestion in the borough. So what can we do about that was one of the questions, although COVID has sort of changed the way the morning and afternoon peaks are working at the moment. We'll see what happens more long term, but that was quite an interesting place to start. Always parking is this balance, and I always describe it as trying to carry a tray of coffees. If you tilt one a little bit too far in one direction rather than any of the others, you end up with quite a mess. It's quite difficult to clean up. So we're trying to support town centre vitality on one corner. We're trying to influence air quality and congestion demand supply in the other corner. We're trying to achieve our policy objectives, but we're also trying to make some income out of it, and parking does make some income for the borough. Can't avoid that. As part of the study, a pre-consultation draft was produced. That was a large document, 66 pages, and we've gradually condensed that story down over time as we've gone. So that was produced for spring/summer 2020. In there were 8 themes that were exploring around all manner of things, and in there, environment was the largest section that we were talking about. Lots and lots and lots and lots of data came out of there for future reference and as part of this study. Those were the 8 themes. I say environment was the largest of those, but some of the interesting outcomes there about what sort of parking requirements do we have. Should we build for the peak? In other words, build so the last space is always there at Christmas, or should we build for the average? And can we use parking sites for some other thing? What promotion and offers can we do to try and influence people? Should we go more digital or online? As we know, COVID has sort of pushed people towards the cashless method of payment. Some of the outcomes from that, we had a lot of data, as I said. Would you welcome EV charge points as one of the questions that we asked there. A lot of people didn't know. Quite a lot of people said yes, though, and in our strategy is to introduce some of those both on and off street in Colchester. Just a bit about the governance. Let's move through this piece. It's been all the way up through our senior management team, been to scrutiny panel, full support at scrutiny for the outcomes of the consultation draft there. We produced the final consultation draft in summer 2020, and that went out to our final public consultation in August, actually. So the post-consultation document is being prepared now, ready for delivery to Cabinet at the end of November. That's going to be produced as a digital booklet, so that'll go in autumn. Focuses on 4 work streams there and 12 principles from the original 66 pages of different things. We'll keep that as a body of research on the website, but trying to focus it down now onto a core number of things. Still, though, environment remains the top priority in all the things that we're seeing as outcomes here. And of those environment, the environmental focus of the strategy is around reduction in carbon, encouraging community to make better choices in the way they travel, times they travel, trying to improve the air quality and all the things we've heard about during this meeting so far, and to support the declaration of the climate emergency. There's a few things, the principles that are seen to support the environmental focus of the strategy, particularly around traffic congestion and the way that parking, the locations of parking, what we charge, and the types of parking that we provide go along to support that and can influence people's behaviour. The type and significantly the amount of public parking that is owned, and whether we build for the peak or whether we build for an average, and whether we want to tackle in some point in the future workplace parking in the town centre. Then around planning requirements that support car-free developments, and as we know, the latest ones there introduce the concept of particularly electric vehicle car clubs once again. One of the things that we looked at is, so what do we do then really? We rent you a piece of tarmac and people say it's a really expensive place to park in Colchester, but actually the rental of the tarmac, the provision of the car park isn't actually very much. Really our tariffs and what you pay are there to support making people think about the way they travel, the time they travel, and opposed to how they travel by car, what would it cost to travel by bus, and all sorts of other things there. If a customer had an account where they paid after parking, we'd be able to go and have a look at some of those other things. Were you the last car in the queue that created the congestion? Were you the person who created the air quality issues by joining the queue at the wrong time in the wrong mode of vehicle, the wrong type of vehicle? If we would move to pay after parking, which is one of the central things in the strategy, we'd be able to go and have a look and explain that a bit better than if I have to get you to guess how long you're going to be and pop your coins in a metal box in the corner. Digital is the way forward. There's a few things there that I mentioned on the way through, just a couple of slides here to finish off, so I know time is pressing now. Making best use of our assets. Should we use parking areas for other things when we're not needing them to park cars on, or could we use that land for something else? Can we license private parking? Those sites that people say, well, that's expensive to park there. Some of those are sites that the council doesn't own and doesn't operate, but we may have a way through legislation to license license those in different ways. The reward for correct usage, so some incentive to travel off-peak and to support the town centre and trade at the right times. Social inclusion is very important as well, and we provide blue badge holder spaces and some concessions for blue badge holders, and low-income families. If we earmark development sites to include different sorts of social housing, and the way we work with reduced car ownership in those, and different sorts of clubs for electric vehicles and so on. Funding car park improvements is a thing that's often missed out as well. We've got them and they stand there for quite a long term. If you build a multi-story, it can be there for 40, 50 years, but they do need some maintenance along the way. And if we invested a bit more in them, they might be a nicer place to be. And also, costs of regeneration and other costs in parking do need to be covered as part of our income. So just a quick summary then before we go to any questions. We'll have this digital booklet that'll be available online, which sets out the new strategy, our positive parking strategy for Colchester. So the focus is on 4 work streams with 12 priorities. Environmental issues are the top priorities. So there we are, we can move to any questions.
Thank you, Richard. I know you well over the years, and I think the rest of the panel will see your efficient and very informative approach. So thank you for that and your passion for it. I think I've seen you in a conference somewhere across the country where you were there representing the parking lobby, but in a positive way. And that's why I like how it's framed this evening. So really helpful. Thank you. I'll go to questions, and I like how you've positioned the North Essex.
Like to be on brand always.
Exactly. Thank you. Mark, please, Councillor Gocher.
Oh, good evening again. Yes, I'm afraid I'm going to have to rain on the positive parade, I'm afraid. Because in terms of parking in Castlewood, I think what a lot of my residents would like is not so much positive parking as positive enforcement of the rules. I mean, only this morning I was bombarded again with another complaint about the problem of parking in North Station Road. People just parking in the middle of the street and going to the bank with the engine running. And there just don't seem to be many traffic wardens about. Why aren't the enforcement people there giving these people tickets? It's been left to local businessmen to talk to them. One was a local publican and was told to F off and various other foul language. Why are the public having to be in that situation? All it needs is people on the prowling high-vis jackets. There was a car parked on double yellow lines in Brook Street, half on the pavement, blocking the pavement. All I did was walk past the house in a high-vis jacket. This young couple saw me out the window, sprung up, car disappeared in a flash. Because they thought I was a traffic warden. So, you know, my point is, why isn't there just more enforcement of pavement parking rules, but also people just blatantly breaking the rules and getting away with it?
Thank you, Richard. I'll come straight back to you on that one.
Yes, we don't shy away from issuing PCNs. As those who will have one know, I have 43 civil enforcement officers across North Essex, and we issue 77,000 penalty charge notices a year. Certainly don't shy away from things. We have people out for the greater part of the day. We can't, however, be everywhere, and we're dealing with some fairly old legislation, unfortunately, that which doesn't let us issue an instant penalty, but in a lot of cases, we have to wait for proof that a vehicle isn't loading. And if they are loading, then on they can go if the road is then clear or a job is then done. Now, there's a couple of issues there, North Station Road and Brook Street I'll take on board, and we'll see what other enforcement can be done in those places. But the parking strategy is, of course, dealing with off-street parking, not on-street, which the North Essex Parking Partnership deals with. We're trying to move in the partnership to a much more simpler arrangement of restrictions that'll say you either can park or you can't park, and a few more innovative ways of tracing those people who are not complying with the law. Pavement parking, there's a consultation out at the moment to see if the government would like to transfer that to local authority control. You can go and have your say up to the 22nd of November. Until it's transferred to local authorities, remains the remit of the police. So there's lots of different places to go, and I say the legislation is quite awkward at the moment.
Thank you, Richard. So this is more of a focus on off-street parking, isn't it? So just for other questions, but thank you, Mark, and thank you for answers, Richard. Robert, please.
Yeah, thank you. Very useful presentation. Always full of ideas for increasing our income, which is absolutely critical this year, of course. I just wondered whether you got any views on the future income generation of electric charging points, and where do you think is the best place for us to put them? I see you've got one going into a car park at the moment. And the second point really was that, is there any way of encouraging people to park off-peak? I know some of the incentives for parking charges do encourage that, but I'm not sure how well known it is. And then, of course, for long-term parking, for people that are working 8-10 hours a day, you've got a lot of competition from public car parks with a £3 rate for the whole day. And I just wondered, do we want to go down that road and try and compete with them, or actually should we be better off focusing just on the shopping trade? Thank you.
A fine balance on the last point there. Thank you, Richard.
Yes, it's been a year of change, as you rightly pointed out. People have changed their habits considerably, and to some degree, the commuter market as we knew it has just dissolved at the moment, and we're all working from home. As one of the directors put, the genie is out of the bottle, isn't it? And we've found a new way of working, and we've just coped with it. So that's really changed a style of parking, I suppose. Yes, we're looking at different uses for the car parks that we have got, particularly the long stays, where we could put a different sort of style of parking in there and encourage people out of their cars and to walk that last mile with something called Park Active, and I think we'll be one of the first in the country to have that. EV charging, we've got some. The biggest problem with EV charging is getting the power capacity in to cope with the level of charging, and there's a time to move with this as well. As cars increase their own capacity, they won't need to charge so often, so we don't want to be left with legacy equipment that is short on charging power. Neither do we want to put them in places where they're really not necessary. Having said that, long stay parking, of course, you could charge at quite a low rate for quite a long time. You don't need your car to do something else, so that would be quite a good way of doing things. So yeah, Priory Street I think will be the first here to have its charging point installed. We've been looking at the best payback for the council and the best provider to use for that. In terms of its income, I think there's only parking income to be had there, as the energy, the resource going into the car, that's to be paid for as its power. A quick go around parking offers and the encouragement of parking and travel off-peak. The Britannia parking offer has been hugely successful. Press the yellow button and get 4 hours for £2.50, and that really did influence the time that people came in as well. There used to be a bit of a gradual parking time, sort of 8:30, 9:30 inwards. It's really made the parking time start at 9:30 now, and influence people not to travel during the peak, which is what it was really about. Some more of that is on the offer for moving forward, and we're trying to move people more over to My Permit, where we can introduce offers in a different way and yeah, have an audience with people as well we can talk to. Longer term, you're right. Maybe we don't need to build for the peak. We've got a big park and ride site there as well for the people who can use that to be able to use park and ride for business travel and for the different sort of stays there, the medium term parking. Provide shoppers places and the right number of long stay places in the right places, so the right people and the right type of parking in the right place for those who do need it, and maybe use some of the land that's freed up from not doing that for redevelopment in the medium to longer term.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Lorcan, please.
Thank you. Yes, there's some really positive things, I think, there, especially in that last answer. I wonder if did we look at all at the prospects for any kind of charging around businesses' car parks, so some sort of levy or something like that? I mean, I understand now is probably not the time to be doing that with lots of businesses struggling, but perhaps for in the future. Are there any? And I guess, you know, COVID has changed things, hasn't it, with the changes to working patterns, which I suppose might be affecting that kind of thinking as well. But I just wondered what any potential future prospects might be along those lines.
Thank you. Back to you, Richard.
Yes, one of the things we've included in the strategy there as a future thing that we could enable, private non-residential parking, it's known as, and Nottingham does this in quite a large way, for charging a levy on businesses that have car parks in the town centre. So in Colchester, we'll be talking about the historic core, and we really don't want people travelling by car, you know, into the middle of Colchester there at the wrong times. Travelling at the right time is fine, but travelling at the wrong times, you start to influence congestion and air quality issues. So yes, there's a thing called private non-residential parking levy. Part of that could be used to sustainable transport initiatives and other things that we can do. But yes, as another way of trying to influence the way people travel into Colchester and support some of the alternatives in making a charge for it as well.
Thank you for that. That ends the questions that I do have listed here, and I do think there's many good thoughts that have come out of this, and hopefully over the coming months and years we'll be implementing some of those novel ideas that you've put forward to us, Richard. I think this panel will be welcome to see an update coming back. I don't know what you think about a timeline for when you might come back and let us know about any of those innovative ideas. What do you think would work for you?
Yes, I mean, now we're just about entering our busiest time in the run to Christmas, or at least I hope we're going to be. Everything else willing. Yes, I say in the run to March, we need to have a look at the tariff structure that we've got, look at the innovations that we can do, look at the different offers that we can put in, work with our suppliers. Yeah, maybe just in the run up to Easter might be a good time to come back and say, here's the document, we can present some of the other things that it portrays. And have another conversation about it, certainly.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you. Again, Matthew, I think this is an item that we review and have a consensus around, which we've done. I thank Richard for all of his contributions and his team. So if there's no dissent, we'll say that we've noted that, and we welcome Richard coming back for an update about March, Easter time next year. Thank you, Richard. Matthew, is there anything we need to do on that, or can I go ahead as I've just suggested?
No, Chairman, I'm just having a look. I think, no, you can carry on with the next item.
Thank you. So it's at this point, we're at 8:05. We've got a couple of items still to go. Would committee members like to have a 5-minute break and come back? Or would you like to plough on?
Happy to go on, Chairman.
I see nods. Okay, we'll go on and we'll try and finish up as soon as we can. Then you have a much longer break. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the update on the Safer, Greener, Healthier, Active Travel in Colchester, which is from Jane Thompson, our Transport Officer at Colchester, but obviously links to the Essex County Council work that's been going on. Jane, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Due to IT issues, my colleague Gillian is going to be putting the presentation up on the screen, and I will talk at those slides. Gillian, if you're able to put the first slide up, that would be fantastic. Okay, thank you. I hope you can all hear me. This is Essex County Council's plan. Safer, Greener, Healthier is their strapline. A bold vision for sustainable active travel in Essex. I'm going to talk you through their slides today and also tell you a little bit about how it relates to Colchester. This presentation includes information on the funding bid to government to improve walking and cycling access to the town centre, and is part of the government's initiative to promote active travel to access town centre shops, jobs, services, etc., as well as accessing local services in residential neighbourhoods. So mainly the town centre, but not exclusively. Page 2, please, Gillian. A bold vision for a new normal is the title. This initiative contained in the presentation does fit in with the Colchester Future Transport Strategy, which is being prepared at the moment by Essex County Council and should be being published very soon. Next slide, please, Gillian. So, rethinking sustainable transport. It's about moral issues, as they say here, not just about infrastructure. It's changing hearts and minds for the good of everyone, not just about infrastructure, but other ways to encourage active travel, giving people options so they don't have to drive. And that's quite important, rather than just being seen to say no to people, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's giving them the options to be able to do that. Whether that's by actually infrastructure being implemented, or whether it's by cycle training or bike hire or other ways to encourage people to travel sustainably. Next page, please. So addressing physical, environmental and economic challenges is very important. Essex County Council will put some facts and figures here. Increasing emissions, I'm not quite sure whether they're saying emissions are actually increasing all over Essex, but we do know that they're high, and the facts and figures you can read there for yourselves regarding CO2 emissions, health impacts, the economic cost of congestion, as well as the statistics there for boys and girls who are physically inactive. Next slide, please. So what will the schemes deliver? The Essex County Council are talking here about all of the schemes that they're proposing over Essex. So what they're saying is a wide range of benefits by more walking and cycling, improving physical and mental health, safer, quieter streets and better public realm, meaning thriving local economies with revitalised high streets and better neighbourhood economies due to the fact that more people can walk and cycle to them. It will help reduce congestion and therefore improve air quality, and of course will help combat climate change. Increasing local jobs, benefits to local businesses, and they've put in here blueprint for the future of sustainable transport, which is great, but I'm not quite sure how that fits in with the presentation. Next slide, please. So what does it mean for the local communities? Well, rather detailed slide, this one, but it's talking about convenient and accessible travel. It's also talking about being at the heart of transport decision making, healthier, happier and greener communities, and also safer streets as well for school children, those shopping, those browsing in shop windows and residents as well. Next slide, please. So the key design principles, this is important. Government guidance has changed recently, and it now states that cyclists should be separated from traffic and pedestrians. So we would like to think no more shared use footways. Cycle routes must join together and be consistent. And we need to actually plan for how the users actually behave. So direct routes, not expecting people to be treated as second-class citizens if they walk or cycle, but making them go around the houses. They need direct routes. And of course, Essex County Council wouldn't be allowed to implement schemes that are purely cosmetic alterations, lines in roads, routes that stop and start with cyclist dismount signs, and also barriers to cycling as well. These won't be allowed or funded by government in the future. And of course, this design will benefit pedestrians. Next slide, please. So prioritising walking and cycling. There may be times when space is reallocated from other modes. So at the moment, a lot of our tarmac area has the priority for cars. That might be looked at differently in the future, perhaps wider footways and segregated cycle routes as well. So clear, segregated and prioritised routes with signals which prioritise walkers and cyclists will be favoured. Next slide, please. This one just gives you visual examples of high quality cycle routes. So Essex-wide, in Essex, they want to improve the current cycle network to increase cycling to double the number of cycle trips by 2025. And also they're proposing to work with Love to Ride organisation to help promote cycling. As I said earlier, it's not just about the infrastructure. Love to Ride is one organisation, but there are others as well which help promote cycling, and we need to work with all of those bodies to take advantage of more cycling and better walking environments and encouraging people to cycle. Next slide, please. So segregated cycling. This slide here just gives you a little bit more detail on segregated cycle tracks, the things that will and won't be permitted. And you can see there the examples that they've chosen. Next slide, please, Gillian. And again, shared use routes. Visually, they're giving you some examples here of what we could expect to see in Essex. The quiet green space paths may still be suitable for shared use. You can see top right there. That's looks like a shared use route coming out of a residential area. This could also be paths that go through country parks where they would expect low numbers of people to use it. They're considering here that shared use might still be suitable in some of those areas. Next slide, please. Contraflow cycling, allowing cycling on quiet one-way streets is being proposed. Physical protection will be on the busier streets. So you can see there are some examples of contraflows. And as you know, in Colchester, there are a few one-way streets, and it's already being looked at as part of the work, the phase 1 work that's in at the moment. Of course, cyclists want to get from A to B, and a one-way street can sever their route, so that's why that's been looked at. Next slide, please. Now, cycle parking. This is quite an issue, I feel. If somebody's persuaded to cycle from their home to the town centre for shopping or their place of work, and they're going to be leaving their bike for a period of time, they want to know that their bike's secure. So it's so important that we have in the town centre a secure cycle centre or cycle hub. For example, a facility like we have at Colchester Station, looking a lot nicer, I should hope, but the idea that somebody can sign up and then access a secure shelter where they can then separately lock their bike and know that it will be safe. And also you can see the example there at the top with the pink shelter. Most homes in Colchester have access to their own space to store bikes, and modern flats have shared use covered cycle racks agreed as part of their development. But perhaps we should look at providing a scheme where residents sign up to use a secure facility if they need it. For example, high density streets with terraced housing could benefit from this type of facility, and they have many of these in London. So we need to look at this sort of thing as well. So secure bike parking at the beginning and the end of your journey is so important. Next slide, please. Essex County Council talk about low traffic neighbourhoods. These also use the phrase livable neighbourhoods as well. They consider initiatives, or better known as living streets as well. They could be introduced in local neighbourhoods, for example, Monkwick, Grinstead, Barn Hall and others. Care must be taken with the design, working with the community to find out what's needed, and so as not to move traffic onto nearby streets if, for example, a road has been closed to through traffic. Low traffic neighbourhoods and livable neighbourhoods are quite important, and we have been working with air quality colleagues who presented earlier on to consider which neighbourhoods could be targeted, and Essex County Council are pleased to be using Colchester Borough's local knowledge. Next slide, please. Safer school streets also ties in with low traffic neighbourhoods. School streets which can be similar to low traffic neighbourhoods, but perhaps focus on the school run and dropping off times. County are looking at school streets as part of their proposals for Colchester for the Norman Way schools and the roads around there. Obviously, every school, like every neighbourhood, is different, and studies would have to be carried out to see what's appropriate. But they could, for example, look at no through traffic just at drop off and pick up time, or of course there's other ways that traffic can be reduced during the school time. We're also working with Essex County Council's school travel colleagues, as they know the schools very well, and County are going to be talking to the schools themselves about these proposals, and of course with Richard Walker's North Essex Parking Partnership and the 3PR scheme as well. So joined up working here. Next page, please. Servicing and car parking. In any scheme being promoted, servicing the shops and businesses is important. Essex County Council are going to work with local businesses to take account of their needs for any scheme that's been put forward. Short-term car parking for local shops should also be maintained where possible. And also consideration should be given to that last mile delivery and the use of e-cargo bikes. You can see the picture there in the top right, an example of an e-cargo bike, which, as you know, is just being launched in Colchester for the use of businesses. That would give them other options rather than the traditional car or van outside their property, picking up and dropping off. Next slide, please. This is an example County have given of reallocation of road space, looking here at a parklet type scheme and planting on the road. So reallocation of road space may well be necessary when it comes to reducing traffic and or promoting walking and cycling in the areas in Essex and possibly Colchester as well. Next page, please. Point closures. They've included this in here as just an example of how you could close roads to through traffic. Years ago in the 80s, we called this traffic calming. But of course, it reduces, or it can reduce, rat running in neighbourhoods, and it can be a cost-effective way to implement a scheme as part of a low traffic zone. And it could also be installed as a trial or temporary measure by putting planters in a road just to test out how various measures could work to improve walking and cycling and improve local neighbourhoods. Of course, with any scheme like this, residents' access, emergency vehicles and blue badge vehicle access should, of course, be maintained. Next slide, please. Junctions. This is just some examples here they've given for details on junctions. That cyclists should have physical separation from traffic and pedestrians. And that leads very quickly on to our next slide. Crossings and roundabouts, the same thing. They're giving details here of what could be introduced, again needing to be segregated, cyclists, pedestrians and motor vehicular traffic all segregated, and of course this will give space back to pedestrians if they're removing the shared use paths that are on so many of our roads in Colchester. Next slide, please. You'll be pleased that I'm nearly there. Transforming Colchester. So this is where they get down to what's happening in our town. And so for Colchester, they're looking at priority giveways, 20-mile-an-hour zone, bi-directional segregated cycle tracks, school streets, low traffic neighbourhoods, and contraflow cycling, as you saw from the previous slides, what this would involve. Next slide, please. So here are the plans of the routes that they're looking at. This is a north-south route that Essex County Council are considering as a priority route for investment. I don't know whether you can see it clearly there, but it starts at Butt Road Car Park, and then travels through Headgate, North Station Road and North Hill, through North Station, and then up towards the Park and Ride site. It will include contraflow cycleway to get from Butt Road to Headgate and then up through Head Street, 20-mile-an-hour zones, and some measures within North Station Road to reduce the speed of the traffic as well, and possibly a closure on North Station Road, like a bus gate, just to allow buses, bikes and perhaps taxis through, but not allowing the through traffic, but of course still allowing the vehicles that need to be in the road who are going to be using the shops in North Station Road. Next slide, please. This is one half of the second priority route for Essex County Council. This is the east-west route. Starting in the west here, there's Lexton Road starting at Spring Lane, travelling along Lexton Road and then through Crouch Street. Possibly looking at contraflow in Crouch Street in Colchester, and you'll note the orange dotted area is the areas where they're considering for a school street scheme. So they're looking at how that could work, and obviously talking to Richard Walker in parking partnerships as well, if they were to reduce the number of perhaps parents who might be dropping off children there, or people who are parking there, and improve the safety for those school children. Next slide, please. And this is the second half of the east-west route, which travels through Crouch Street, crossing Headgate, St John's Street, through Vineyard Street, and then Priory Street as well. Priory Street could be a contraflow, or it could be a one-way for cyclists with the flow of traffic up Priory Street, and then if you're making the return journey, High Street, and then cutting through via First Sight, and then back into Vineyard Street that way. Of course, it's important that priority routes link in with the communities, and of course, these priority routes will also link into the local walking and cycling investment routes as well. But this is the routes that they're hoping to put the first tranche of money into. Next slide, please. So that's the end of the Essex County Council slides, and these are just my notes here, just to tell you that we do have a stakeholder working group chaired by Essex County Council, Councillor Mitchell, and it's attended by ourselves from Colchester Borough, the North Essex Parking Partnership, Walk Colchester, One Colchester, and local businesses are represented as well, and a representative from the blind and partially sighted groups, and also Colchester Cycling Campaign. They meet every 2 weeks, and coming from that stakeholder group, there's now a design workshop which will look at the very, very details of exactly what could be implemented on those priority routes. This will work with the stakeholders and especially with the businesses as well along those routes to find out exactly what their needs are. That starts next Wednesday. Traffic modelling is also started now by Essex County Council, so they are getting ready to look at the different designs that might come through and then measure them with the traffic numbers that there are currently and see how they could work. Government funding, as you'll be aware, this bid went in a little while ago to government, and Essex County Council are still waiting for the announcement out of, I think it was 7.2 million in total for Essex. Colchester has been put forward for quite a chunk of that funding. So if Essex County Council are successful, then we're hoping that community engagement will be starting very soon. And Essex County Council are currently planning how this will take place. And then, of course, the implementation plan will follow with timescales and schemes hopefully implemented, the right schemes hopefully implemented as soon as possible. Just to say finally, we are also linking in with the town deal, the investment plan. We're aware of what's going in there. Obviously, we're working with Essex County Council on that as well to make sure that there's no disconnect when it comes to what county are bidding for here and what we're looking at for town deal as well. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take back any comments to Essex County Council and to the workshop.
Thank you, Jane. That is very helpful, bearing in mind you are a CBC officer and you've just covered most of Essex's plans, but thank you, and it shows how you're working so closely with them. One personal point, I mean, you know, I've been involved with this and put most of my comments through along the process. One comment I'd take back, if you could, is I do want to see as much greenery as possible. We are providing safer, greener greener, healthier ways of travel, but also I'm fed up of tarmac being put down. It's a 20th century solution, or even a 19th century solution. If you look at the Ipswich Road, for example, where you could easily have natural planting, low-level planting in the middle, or trees that enable people still to drive and look around. So I just think we definitely need to look at greening rather than completely tarmacking everything with road solutions and new curbs, etc. So you don't really have to answer me on that. It's just a little grumble, because we all know about surface level flooding, we know about runoff, we know about the reflection of heat off of tarmac. It just doesn't help with the biodiversity, it doesn't help climate change, etc., etc. I'll stop ranting and I'll go to the people with their hands up. So Nigel Chapman and then Mark Gocher. So Nigel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Very, very enthusiastic presentation from Jane there. Very impressed with all the wonderful drawings and that sort of thing one would expect from Essex, I'm sure. I'll try not to comment on that really in any great detail, but I take your point and I think it's very well made. You know, the last thing we really want to do is increase signage, increase tarmac and enormous bollards to stop people going here, there and everywhere. You know, this is going to ruin everywhere, frankly, in my view. We need to make things far less harsh. But the main point I want to make is my usual one. I make it several times, I'm afraid. It's just, this doesn't help people in the rural areas one iota. You know, they say, well, okay, we can go into Colchester Town Centre, we can drive around, we can cycle around there, all these wonderful cycle tracks and that sort of thing. But if we try to get out of our villages, we're mown down by traffic on what clearly are rat runs. Dedham's a classic example at the moment. There's so much building in Tendring that the lanes through Dedham are taking traffic, trying to bypass access to the A12 up in Suffolk, and they try to get through to Ardley interchange and that sort of thing. And the lanes in Dedham are absolutely horrendous. And nobody's going to cycle in those conditions to get into Colchester. And the villages are just totally ignored in these plans, I'm afraid. And that's one of, in my opinion, Essex does not believe a village exists, I don't think. But we do need some consideration.
It's not just me who's lost Nigel there. Hopefully he'll come back. In the meantime, I might have to move to Mark Gocher and we'll come back to Nigel. Okay, thank you. Moving to you, Mark.
Yes, well, first of all, I thought it was a really good presentation, and there's so much good stuff in it. It's excellent. I'd like to echo your thoughts, Chair, about the greenery. I totally agree on that. My predecessor as Castle Ward councillor was always saying how we need to put the trees back on North Station Road. And I absolutely agree with that. So, you know, one plea I would have of the county council is to seriously consider that.
I'll just say, Mark, we are trying to do that. The borough, in line with Essex County Council, are doing that. I brought it up at the last meeting we had with the county. So hopefully you'll see that wish.
Excellent stuff. I'd also like to talk about just the cycle lanes, because I know that there's been quite a bit of lobbying in the press about certain cycle lanes and how they should be shared with buses. I don't think that's a good idea, and I just think the county council need to resist those kind of calls, because I'm a cyclist, but I'm not what I would call a professional cyclist. I'm not in, you know, a Colchester cycling campaign enthusiast to that level. And the one thing that will put me off cycling in a town is sharing the space with buses, cars, or pedestrians for that matter, because I don't want to knock them over. So I'm not really a fan of shared spaces. So in the presentation, it was mentioned how, you know, you're looking to move away from shared spaces and just keep everything to its designated space. And I think that is absolutely the way to go. The other thing I really liked in there was the secure, you know, place to park your bike. And we need more of that in the centre of Colchester, because you need a place where your bike isn't going to get rained on, and secondly, if people have got expensive bikes, they need to have it locked up and secure within an enclosed space. So I thought that was excellent stuff, and the more of that, the better, really.
Thank you, Mark. I'll take a couple of comments and then come back. I don't know if Emily Harrop's still on the call, but I forgot to mention to her I did the bikeability training the other day, which we can all do if we want to use the cargo bikes. That will be offered out to you as councillors. We have Robert, then Lee, then Lorcan. Robert, please.
Yes, thank you, Jane. Very interesting presentation. Ambitious, I think, is the right word. My concern is that a lot of these schemes, and I think about the cycle lane up Mile End Road and things like that, cost an absolute fortune. And it's all about, as Mark Corey's been saying, just implementing more and more different surfaces, and the cost is dramatic. We could get far better value, I'd have thought, with screening with shrubs. I'm not a great favourite of trees. Trees upset the road structure as well as the buildings next door. Small shrubs and high shrubs are probably a better solution. But my biggest concern with your proposals, and I just want to be reassured that you've consulted properly with the businesses that are affected. You said you got business representation, but North Station Road, Crouch Street, just to name two, you've got a lovely mix of small individual businesses along both of those roads, and they will be struggling if traffic is stopped, and the contra flow of bikes as well. People coming at you at different angles or different directions. I can see the absolute confusion with that. So my concern is, especially in Crouch Street, you've got Manor Road behind Crouch Street, which is actually almost empty and be ideal for cyclists. But if you start taking the parking away from Crouch Street, it loses its character. And actually, it's the parked cars that protect the pedestrians going and the school children going up and down the street. So I just want to be reassured that businesses have consulted at an early stage, and they do have a real input into the scheme rather than just a tick box. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Just before I move on, and Jane, I'm sure will come back. When the county first launched it, there wasn't enough consultation. And we actually set up the monitoring group. That was a suggestion from me and from the Borough Council, and that happened. So they have been listening along the first phase as a retrospective measure that we put in, and they've understood that. And in the second phase, I think have got it much more and included businesses more, but still there will have to be some compromises. But I will move on, and hopefully Jane will come back. Lee, please.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, like Councillor Gocher, I sit on this committee, although Councillor Gocher's school, so that has 10% of the meetings you can make. But I think some of the what do we call them? The quiet neighbourhood idea is very good. The Dutch Quarter is a good example of this. It's been completely transformed by the lack of cars using it as a cut through. And you can actually walk down a historic part of Colchester, which is quite nice. And I have to disagree with Councillor Davidson. I think that Crouch Street is made quite poor by the parking there. It's usually aggressive drivers who are parking to go and do a quick shop in Newsagent or Tesco. For me, coming into Colchester, that's not the nice side to come into, seeing lots of cars parked up and angry beeping drivers. That would arguably be somewhere to put some of the safer cycling storage. But some really good ideas there moving forward. Just one thing as well that is a worry is that there is talk that Grant Shapps may pull the funding. People may have seen an article he did recently, which was having a pop at council that had installed cycling, such as has happened in Colchester, claiming that it was causing more congestion when actually too many cars causing congestion, as we know. They're looking at possibly pulling the funding. So we may want to look at a strategy for that, of whether we write to the Secretary of State on that issue, to say that we support the aims of this project that Essex County Council are doing. In fact, it's cross-party may help. for me, this is kind of the transformational change that Colchester needs to move forward. We can't, I understand what we say when we can't ignore the driver, but we can't let the drivers dictate what is happening. We already know there's no valid reason for anyone to drive down the high street unless they're a blue badge holder, delivery driver, emergency driver, or bus driver. There's no other valid reason people to do it unless they just want to get home quicker. So these are really good ideas. We have to get modal shift. This is one way of doing it. I understand Councillor Chapman's issues around rural areas, but I think that's a bigger ball game. Unfortunately, it looks like he hasn't joined the meeting again, but I think that's more of an issue for his county councillor out there. This is primarily what the county are doing is in town centres, and we need to sort our town centre out first before we can look at areas like that. But some really good stuff. I think Jane has summed it up very well. And moving forward, it does look positive if we keep that funding. I think it is dependent on that funding, looking at how council finances are going.
Thank you, Lee. Just 2 points. One, in order to get people into the town, they need to come from rural areas as well. So I think it's a simultaneous approach, but I do understand your point. I think you're making is more about density in the town and people going around it. But I have put to the county council that it's all nice having east-west routes, but if they don't go much beyond the town, then you're not stopping the car drivers coming from out of town in. So that's really important. And just to name drop the Colchester Cycling Campaign, who've put an answer to my question on Twitter and also to Councillor Davidson as well, is that the segregation can be done in such a good way with parklets, but also there's little trees, little filters that create modal shift. Absolutely agree that they can be green. They don't have to be tarmac. They don't have to be bollards, as I think other councillors supported the points I made on. So hopefully that's the way forward that the county will take, and I'm sure Jane will emphasise that. The last point from Lorcan, please, over to you.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, absolutely very positive plans. And I think, they do seem ambitious, as Councillor Davidson said. And I hope that they, we get that funding and are able to deliver on them. Because I think without really changing the road infrastructure, you're never really going to get people out of cars and onto bikes. And, it's not likely to be successful otherwise. I'm really keen on this idea of the low traffic neighborhoods and the point closures to sort of minimize rat running. I know that there are places in our town where maybe it's not kind of a whole network of roads, neighborhood type of area like Grinstead or Beerchurch or somewhere, but where you do get a lot of rat running. So I'm thinking, for instance, of the roads in between Malden and Butt Road, where you often get traffic kind of backed up at busy times, and of course we've got schools around there as well. So I would be keen for us to be looking at having those kind of point closures on those sorts of roads as well, to encourage traffic to use the main roads and not just to cut through those sorts of more quiet residential streets, where often, as I say, at busy times you can get traffic backed up and then a lot of pollution being kicked out in that area. So I hope that kind of thing will happen as well. But yeah, very positive plans, and I'd be very supportive of those.
Thank you, Lorcan. I'll just come back to you, Jane. A lot of points made that I think you can take back as feedback, but perhaps one or two questions raised if you want to come back. Thank you.
Yes, that's fine. It was, yes, thank you very much, everybody, for your comments. It was interesting to hear about the fact that you obviously all like the idea of the principles of what's we're hoping is going to be going ahead to encourage walking and cycling, and the greenery aspects as well. Councillor Chapman mentioned about what's being done for the rural areas, and of course that is a question, but I know that Richard Walker is keen to promote Park Active, and of course there is the opportunity for people to take their bikes, perhaps fold up bikes, into their car to a park and ride site or another out of town car park park and then make that last short journey in a sustainable way to actually be able to increase their activity. Also, it was mentioned about the businesses, Crouch Street, North Station Road. Essex County Council haven't wanted to start talking in detail with businesses until they've got the funding and actually have something to talk around. But rest assured, within the monitoring group, which then turned into the stakeholder active travel group, chaired by Essex County Councillor Mitchell, that the business community is very well represented. I think the last one I was at, there was 5 people there from the business community, and all part of One Colchester as well with Sam Good. So we are working with the Essex County Council and Colchester, are working with them in forming the proposals, but of course there will be much more work to go ahead when it comes to any proposals. They were the 2 questions I think that came forward. Was there anything else, Chair? All the other comments I've noted down and I'll take back to the next working group.
Thank you. Unless I see any other indications, I think most were points to take back, Jane, which I think we noted. So thank you for that. I'll just say thank you publicly as well to Councillor David King. As many of you know, he's a hard-working councillor on the Cabinet, and he took the role to work between businesses and the County Council on this, and he's the representative for us. Councillor Goss does have transport, but and they overlap, but David King was more able to get to the meetings and actually has put in, as Jane, I think, is nodding along, a lot of effort to ensure businesses have been represented, and as a keen cyclist himself, we get the fine balance that is needed as we go forward. So thank you to him. Okay, thank you all for your contributions. Thank you, Jane, for the presentation and taking all those points forward. Good luck with that. And I think, again, regular feedback on that as it goes through would be helpful. Thank you. So once again, sorry?
Yes, thank you. That's all.
So once again, Matthew, I think we've got consensus there. Points have been put forward, and I don't think we need a vote on that at all. Is there anything you want to say, Matthew, as how we progress on that?
No, you're correct, Chairman. Just need to note the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. Right, we get to the last points on the agenda, and I'm just aware of the time. So a brief verbal update, item 11, on how we've got so far on the carbon management plan, but also to introduce our sustainability and climate change manager. Maggie did introduce herself at the start. If she is still there, I'd welcome her to just introduce herself very briefly and just explain your role now at the council. Maggie.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you. This is my first official panel meeting, which is very exciting. And it's wonderful to see all of the energy that's being sustained throughout the hours. And it's really helpful to know that there's all of you to turn to help guide our work. So this is a new role for the council, as you all know, and I feel very privileged to have taken it up. And my remit is to guide us all and facilitate, drive us and the community towards achieving zero carbon emissions in the decade ahead. And so I'm here to work with you and to hear from you and your wards, and to share with you some of our plans going forward. We'll speak about the carbon management plan in a moment. Just a little bit about myself. I come mostly from the international development sector, which I've worked for the past 20 years on climate change. So I'm very interested and have a lot of experience around community development, around issues of equity and participation and empowerment. And I was very attracted by this role specifically because of the innovations that are coming out at the local level through the council around heat provision and other. I see this as an opportunity to really facilitate the community to achieve the ambitions that they see as valuable, and help us to drive our direction towards their ambitions. So the engagement panel, which we've heard of already, will help us do that. And I want it to be a real meaningful engagement. I also want to highlight that already looking at how we do the financing of all of our wonderful ambitions. And I'll be turning to you all at some point soon to help us manage our ambitions with the state of the world as it is today, and to think really innovatively. So I promise to bring you a lot of energy and ambition and bring all of my skills and experience to the table. And I've got thick skin, so I'm ready for all of your feedback and your comments, and I look forward to our partnership. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Maggie. And we'll see you a lot more in the meetings in between, but also at these ones. And they aren't always this long, and lots of energy has been spent. We'll try and conserve our energy as much as possible. I have Rory indicating. Rory, please.
So I would just be very quick, Chair. We're obviously very pleased to have Maggie on board. It increases our capacity to support this agenda. Obviously, Ben's been doing an absolutely fabulous job. I can't speak highly enough of him as an officer, and I know Maggie will do the same. So we're very pleased. Just Chair, just mindful of the time, and on the next agenda, we're going to go into the carbon management plan in some great detail. So I think if you would be happy to, we can delay that item to the next meeting. It was just really to give an update that we're continuing to work with the Carbon Trust, but we expect them to be at the next meeting, and we can give a full briefing on the progress that's being made at that time.
Okay, thank you. Because you are doing that work with the Carbon Management Trust, it may be better, as you say, to take it back then. How do the panel feel? Are there any questions you want to ask of Rory before we move on? Lee Scaldis?
Just wondering if it'd be easier if a written report of what's happened could be sent in, save on time, and then we've got an update ready for the next meeting for a more full comprehensive report.
Thank you, Lee. I see Rory nodding, just to give us some of the brief updates before we get to the more detailed report next meeting. Okay, are we happy with that, panel?
Yes,
yeah. Happy. Thank you all. Thank you, Rory, for that. So the next item would have been the work programme to talk through. So that is important, just to see the steer of where we are going. And I know, Ben, that following conversations at the briefing, you've got a few updates on that. Shall I come to you, Ben, or Rory?
I'm happy to start, and then Rory can sort of come in and just double check I've said everything right. Does someone want to bring up the current work programmes just so people can see it on the screen? Maybe Matthew, if you could bring it up, and then I'll sort of talk around it. Just the changes.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and if you just
hang on.
Do you want to go ahead, Ben, in terms of the next meeting?
Yeah, no, I think we're there. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So for the next meeting, 17th of December, the changes we are suggesting making is taking out item 2, a discussion around an interim action plan. We're suggesting moving this back until the March meeting, and we'll also reword what that means. So essentially what it means is creating a more detailed plan of action for the new municipal year, for 21-22, about sort of tangible actions that the council will deliver. We've obviously got the climate emergency action plan as it is, but it's a very strategic and high level document and doesn't go into detail about, it does in some projects, but not in a lot of things. There's a lot of sort of investigate words, research words. We want to show and be accountable to the public about what we're actually going to achieve within that new municipal year. So we're suggesting bringing that item to the 11th of March meeting, give a more detailed report of that and outline some of those actions and sort of objectives. The rest of the items are the same as already said, the carbon management plan for that meeting, and an item on decarbonising our fleet with the Energy Saving Trust, hopefully in attendance as well. Then going on to the January meeting, removing the item on developing environmental sustainability strategy. I think we're taking this out just to reconsider whether we need a environmental sustainability strategy anymore. I think this was an older document we used to have before other documents were developed, such as the Climate Emergency Action Plan. And so there'll be a reconsideration about whether we need environmental sustainability strategy and its purpose in the future. So we're just removing that one from the work programme. It won't be brought up again. And then the last change, I think, is adding as a standing agenda item an update on the Climate Emergency Action Plan, bringing a report, just a quick report summarising actions that have been achieved or progress sort of since the last meeting. So that'll be a standing agenda item going to all the meetings. I think that is all. Rory, feel free to jump in if there's anything else.
I think you've covered everything there, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I think the only one I'd say is the developing the environmental sustainability strategy. I think perhaps we could have it on the agenda, an explanation as to why not, which you've kind of given, but just we need to understand we're developing a number of different strategies and plans here. We need an overarching plan, which is the Climate Emergency Action Plan. And underneath that, we need to be absolutely clear what our different agendas are and how we tackle them, what's the best way to do it. And I think you're right to say we don't need to keep doing things that we used to do now that we have a new approach. But I think it would be wise just to absolutely make clear and outline what that approach is to members, to officers, and therefore for it to be clear for the public as well. So I suppose just a discussion of the structure of the plans that we will have. And also, just to see a draft format at least could come to the spokesperson's briefings for the interim plan, perhaps before March the 11th, just so we can tailor that and make sure we're looking at the right things. So that will be my steer. Otherwise, I accept your changes and your comments. I think they're helpful. Thank you. Are there any councillors who object to some of those changes? Are we happy that streamlines it a bit more and lets us focus on the right things? I see no dissent, so people must be happy. Okay, then we're happy with the work programme. Matthew, again, do we need to make any changes on that? Any votes?
We don't need to vote, Chairman. As long as everybody's happy, I'll pick up the changes and they'll be presented to the next panel meeting for formal ratification then.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Then we are there without having to have any votes. We've consensually got through the evening. Thank you all for expending your energy, and we'll conserve it a bit more next time, as I said before. Thank you all. Thank you again for Maggie coming for the first time, and thank you, Ben, for all the work behind the scenes. Thank you, Matthew, for keeping us all in line. So thank you, Rory, to your whole team. Thank you, councillors.